Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Brand Innovators Livecast series. We're excited to have you here with us today. My name is Lauren Kenya, and I am our Vice President of Client Success. I'm super excited for this program because our partner Ampersand has put together a fantastic afternoon of thought leadership for you. We have marketers from Burger King, Mass Mutual, General Motors, BlackRock, and so many more. So before we get kicked off and I officially introduce you to your wonderful MC for the day, we'd like to cue up a Sizzle Reel that features what we've been doing over the past 10 months.
Every single person on our team, from the top down, from the bottom up, everybody stepped up.
You've been with us since the beginnings. We're going to keep the ball rolling. We have two more amazing speakers.
We were going to launch our very first virtual event, which we called the Livecasts. Historically, Brand Innovators has been a real-world events-based organization. We would go around the country, every major market, hosted by major brands, Fortune 500 companies. We would bring our community members together in the real world at those events to share with each other and learn from one another. It became obvious in March, like many other brands, we had to rethink our entire model.
We're really excited to kick this off and to welcome Angela.
Joining as our moderator, Alex Belady.
I'm really happy to be here with Steve Kennedy today.
They've continued the momentum all the way through this time that we've all been, unfortunately, stuck inside during the pandemic.
It feels like a family. It feels like a community.
Just got married 2 days ago.
Congratulations.
It's been an honor to be part of the virtual stage.
Thanks so much to Brand Innovators for having me here today.
Learning from them and being part of a community was really great. So thank you, Brand Innovators.
We've had 112 live casts, 150 private virtual roundtables. Between those two, 1,200 senior brand marketers from all sorts of amazing brands in our community, and all the amazing brand marketers, all of our fantastic partners and sponsors.
I found the experience exciting, thoughtful, inspirational.
I look forward to when we're back in person, but until then, this has worked very well.
If you haven't attended, you should, and you should bring your team with you.
I'm going to be a marketer for the rest of my life.
It's great, Chris. I love it, bro.
Full creative power, and they're like, you know what, you know best, you do you.
How is working from home going for you?
It's probably driving my wife crazy.
Fantastic job moderating. This is really wonderful. Thank you all.
I get nostalgic every time I watch that video. It does not get old. So thanks to the team for playing that. And so I would like to officially pass the virtual mic over to Davina Kent. Davina is the SVP of Client Partnerships at Ampersand and one of our closest partners. So she is popping in just in a second. But we're really excited to have her host the rest of the program. Hi, Davina.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for having me and the rest of the Ampersand crew today. What an exciting video. I hope we're going to keep the momentum going with today with all the great speakers. So before we begin, before I introduce our first speakers, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Ampersand and give you guys an overview of who Ampersand is. We're really excited to sponsor today's session. We've been a long supporter of Brand Innovators community. We are an insights-driven TV, media, and technology company. We empower advertisers to find their audiences in 85 million households in every DMA across more than 150 networks, with over 60% of all addressable households in the US. Our mission is very simple. Our mission is to move TV forward, and many of the marketers today are going to be talking about how they're moving TV forward from their to support their brand initiatives. And we do that by empowering marketers to more efficiently plan, buy, and measure their TV investment. So my role at the company is leading our client partnerships team, which is focused on working with brands directly. And you're going to meet many of the folks on my team, including our president, in today's session. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, which is Jorge from Burger King. Jorge leads the media, digital, and social at Burger King. Really important role for Burger King. If any of you have seen some of the Burger King folks coming through Brand Innovators. So welcome, Jorge. And with Jorge is Paige, our head of client partnerships at Ampersand, and she'll be moderating the session today. So So excited to have you both. I think Jorge will be joining us in a second.
I'm here.
Hi, Jorge. I see you. Maybe you want to turn on your video. Cool.
There you go.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Right.
And you?
Welcome. I will let you guys take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Davina, so much. It's my pleasure to talk with Jorge today and introduce him. He has been at Burger King for a few years, but really started his career in Brazil with Whirlpool and really worked on communications and media there. He was then transferred to the United States, handling the Latin American business for Whirlpool. And Burger King's really fortunate to have stolen him about 4 years ago. And for the past 3 years, he's been actually handling he's been the director of media and social channels. Super excited to talk with you today, Jorge. His, basically his all of his work has been done around the performance of media and marketing. And so he has a really good perspective on that. So really super excited to talk to you further about that and how it's affecting the future of TV around audience and measurement.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I hope I can help everybody and share a little bit of what we are doing here at Burger King.
Fantastic. I know that you can. So let's just kick it off. So Jorge, let's just start with the question of, how you are currently using TV in accordance with your digital and social campaigns. And then sort of secondary to that, would you describe what's working best with it? And then what you would like to see improve or evolve across it?
For sure. I think two things that I want to maybe highlight in the beginning is that what is the role of media? I know it's common word and you talk about media, the media plan, the media buy. I think what is the role, what we should expect media? I think for us, or at least for me, it should drive behavior. It should drive a change in perception of your brain. Maybe it's the consideration. Maybe it should drive behavior to someone to download your app, or to go order delivery with you, or to go to a physical restaurant of ours. And I think the second, it is about the audience. In the end, we want to give a better experience to our fans and guests and the audience. We don't want to come across with a noise or something that you are not expecting from us. We want to be we want to drive a message to you that makes sense to you. So I think with these two things in mind of the behavior side of media that should drive behavior, and also the other side, which is the audience, we have been, for us, the center of our media strategy, it's not the channels, it's not the mediums, but it's the audience. I think the channels are just there to make the allocation to drive this better experience and to make sure we are accomplishing these guests to move from each step of the consumer decision journey. So when we talk about TV, we talk each time less about TV alone, but we talk each time more about the video, a video strategy, how TV is working with OTT, with online video, with social. I think that's where we are interested in see audiences moving in the channels being just the mediums that we use to talk to the audience. So TV for us, definitely, I think Burger King continues to be a player into the linear space. But each time we have been diversifying, our media mix, and we talk each time more about the media as a whole, and not a specific channel. I think the second part, you asked, what you guys are seeing as result, and I think we are seeing exactly that. Our campaigns, they perform better, and could be talking a brand campaign, or even to drive someone to our restaurants. They perform better, even if we think about traffic to the restaurant. They perform better when the channels are working in conjunction versus isolation. So I think today we have a lot of, I think, and we'll talk about when we have a lot of things in place for attribution, and we have like tangible results, and we can materialize that the conjunction works better than TV, like standalone.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. All of those things, the personalization, really following the audience. That's certainly our mantra at Ampersand, is really an audience first approach. And then to your point, really combining those tactics and understanding that combined, they do work better with your messaging. So I completely agree with that. So let's talk a little bit about data, as we know that that's really critical in terms of driving media effectiveness and really trying to find those efficiencies. So in terms of your audience strategy, how are you using first-party data? And then how is this data being used to develop your audiences and segmentation and such to be able to, whichever channel you use for those?
Yeah, I think continuing then, I think for us it's super important because, as I said, if we, like the point of start for us is the audience, it's not the channels. So data becomes like extremely important for us. It's something digital as a whole for Burger King has been such an area of focus that we have been growing in investing. I'm talking about like the app, our capabilities with delivery, but when even comes like more to media, this is following like what the company has been growing. So for us, it's extremely important. I think I can give, so we use, of course, like we have like first party data. And the fact, again, like why we want to do that, I think it goes back to the experience that I was talking about. We want to talk to someone, where it makes sense for the person in terms of their relationship with Burger King. Maybe it's someone that it's starting, that it's not like a usual guest for us, so it's completely different message and channels that we will talk about. Maybe other guests or other folks, it's a lapsed user or even like a heavy user. So for us, it's really part of this strategy. We want and we use that to deliver a better experience. Maybe you are a Whopper person, maybe you are an Impossible Whopper person. Maybe you prefer to, maybe you go to our physical restaurants, maybe you prefer our app and delivery. So we understand all of this, and from that we start to craft the message for each segment. I think what I can say is that I think one thing that was key for us, and I think it is key, I think, for everybody, it is to have a very clear definition of your audiences. So I know everybody talks about like acquisition, lapsed, switcher, current guests, but I think each, depending on your objective, depending on your scale of your brand, these have different definitions. So for instance, like for us at Burger King, the definition of acquisition for restaurant, like physical restaurant, is different than online. So I think it's something that it's important to spend a lot of time and make even like studies to craft very well the definition. Acquisition should be considered 1 year, 2 years, never bought at Burger King. What is the time frame that we are defining acquisition? And from that, I think that will make everything much more easier when you have to push this audience. I think last year we did a lot in terms of like e-commerce with everything that was happening with like COVID. And it was amazing to see how everything comes to life in the end for someone's like, for the folks out there that are very analytical, like myself, to see that being showed on like ROAS of each audience, and you see the performance, how it's different from one audience to the other, the performance, and how you have to continue always like a testing and learn agenda, because one asset can make completely difference and improve or decrease your performance. So for us, it's key. It's something that we are investing, we will continue definitely to be a area of priority for us.
Yeah, it was super interesting to talk about that. I know we chatted a bit about, we'll talk about measurement and attribution a little bit more in a moment, but the cost of an acquisition customer is going to be far different than one that you're just trying to increase, whatever the menu, the dollar size of the meal is, or whatever the case may be. They're equally as important. It's how you achieve it, right? Which brings me back to your app. You brought that up, and I want to talk a little bit about the online ordering that you guys have white labeled. Clearly with COVID this year, and we talked a little bit about the increase in that. But what I found super interesting is that really Burger King's app hasn't been around that long, but has been really successful, even outside of COVID, in terms of app installs and really building that loyalty. Clearly creative and channels is going to play a role in that, but what do you attribute the success to, the quickness of that? Because really I feel like Burger King's kind of pioneered the way for that in the QSR space.
I think the success of that is honest. The honest answer is probably a lot of sweat, of hard work,
right.
Hundreds.
A lot of people.
I'm just being truly being the outspoken for. I'm talking for representing probably 100 people, even more related to that. I think when we talk about success, there is the visible and the invisible. I think I'm sure it's notorious, what we do, or the campaigns that we do, and that get everybody talking about and participating. It's really cool. But in the back end, a lot have to happen for for that to make to make that successful. So I think it's truly a combination of being a clear priority for us, being a clear priority, everyone at Burger King understand that is a priority for the brand. So I think with that comes resources, time, focus, budget, and truly a combination of the back end. There's a lot of engineers, people that we don't talk a lot in marketing, but they are the ones making the MarTech show up and be functional for us. Then I think a combination of great campaigns. I think Opera Detour, I think everybody remembers that, but we have done a lot of other things putting QR codes on TV and gamifying in spot for you to try to catch a QR code in the TV. We have been doing a lot, and also a complementation of all the efforts that we have from media to drive. And I think it's what I was explaining before, this difference of audiences and how they perform different in terms of ROAS and what you have to do. We have done a lot I'd say for the few years back. In 2020 was a key priority, and all the efforts around CRM, personalization. So it's very hard to point to what it is making the difference. I think it's what it probably is making the difference is the company letting it clear for everybody that it's a priority. Yeah. Then you have engineers working against that. You have marketeers working against that. You have the media guys thinking in plans to drive sales for that. So I think it's really a combination. That's why I was making the joke of sweat.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of people behind it. I remember hearing, about Detour and just the amount of work that went into it from a location perspective, and the partnership with Waze. And there's so much dedication to not only these disruptors, but also to any of the creatives that Burger King rolls out. So I find it really, really interesting. So let's get back to measurement and attribution a little bit. With regard to those things, marketers can measure TV, in terms of the full part of that full funnel more than ever before. What are your initial thoughts on this? And how would you like to see, your holistic cross-screen measurement evolve further? And then how are you managed second to that? So I'll give you another question on top of it too that you can come to. But then how are you managing the reach and frequency across all of these channels?
Such a good question. If I may, I'll start with the last one, and then if I forget, you remind me the first one.
Totally.
I think, I think reach and frequency, of course, everybody understands, is kind of a key currency of like our media life. But I think again, alongside with CPM, they are just metrics. They are just numbers, right? That of course it helps you to make sure you are in the right direction. But in the end, we want to go back to what we think media should be doing, that it's to drive behavior. So I think reaching frequency definitely helps. It's a metric that we pay a lot of attention, but has the metrics and the outcomes need to be closer to the behavior. Sometimes you can have like a great reaching frequency and nothing happens. So, like, and if you are stuck to reaching frequency, what do you do? Like, why it's working, why it's not working? So I think in terms of attribution, and we can talk a little bit more that I think it has to go through like reaching frequency, but it has to go beyond, has to be matched with like more business outcomes and behaviors, as I was explaining. In terms of reaching frequency, I think today, because the audience is so diversified, it is key to have a cross-screen measurement. Or TV alone doesn't tell you the full story. And also, if you look, everybody will lose reach probably year over year, just because TV is losing viewership around like 5-10%. So it comes like doesn't tell the full story. I think one thing that was like key for us when we jumped into like OTT space like some years back, and we did a lot of studies around like incremental reach point over linear. So what we were trying to understand on that reach frequency like criteria was to understand like if our buys of OTT was delivering like an incremental reach over linear. And we learned a lot in that space. We learned that depending on the parts, the incrementality is different. Some have higher like incrementality than others, depending on the combination of your network mix versus your OTT partners. So again, would drive like a different incremental reach for that. But I think that study that we did a few years ago was really key to say, I think the OTT space is something that we need to do to jump in. And I think we have been doing since then.
Right. How are you really looking at that holistic measurement now, knowing that it's not perfect? Are you using MTA? Are you using MMM? Like, what exactly is the combination that's working at least more directionally now, even though we know that all of them we're still trying to pull it together as an industry? What are you doing currently for those measurement purposes?
Yeah, I think we spoke a bit about this, and I also made a comment that you need to embrace issues and caveat, because I think if you sit and wait, I will only do that and jump until everything's perfect, probably you'll be late like to the game. I think we know that it's a space that is evolving as we talk, as we speak. But I think, look, we need to understand that it's not perfect, but there is a lot of value into that if you want to become a more like performance-based like brand and start to time more, move away from this old currency of CPM impressions that is just metrics, and start to talk about like outcomes and behaviors. So I think for Burger King, we have in place MTA and MMM. The reason why we do that, and the reason why we are doing that, is because there is like pros and cons in each one of them. They have different characteristics. That is, they are more complementary than, I think it's more an and question than or question. I think MTA will help you to be like more real time, maybe get like better details like in terms of like audience, and be more specific about like media formats, assets that you are leveraging, tactics. I think it's more granular in real time. But of course, then there's the conversation, what happens with the walled gardens, what happens that how some methodologies are done, it's weighted and weighted, what's the look back window, there's a lot of technicality to that. Then I think that it has a completely different methodology. It's not data signals, it's more a macronometric exercise that tells more like a full picture. I think it's more strategic, but again, it's not real time. It's not as real time as like MTA is. And I think it's, although has its name of media mix modeling, it goes beyond. It goes beyond media, right? Like can touch in the restaurant business, can touch operations, can touch competitive, not only about media. So I think it gives a better spectrum of performance.
Right. Thank you for that. We talked a little bit about this too, and understanding you're looking at TV along with your holistic strategy as video. There has been some shift into more digital channels from the linear space. You can make the assumption because there is more measurement around it, but there's obviously viewerships that's shifted too, because that it does include digital, encompasses everything from online video to streaming, to all of those things. Do you feel like that your linear TV is you're getting the measurement metrics that you need to actually facilitate or strategize or optimize against your national or any linear TV that you're doing right now in accordance with your digital?
I think you probably touched the two main reasons why everybody is moving away from TV and going to digital, or maybe not even like moving away. Maybe that's a harsh expression. I think everybody's following where the viewership is, where the audience is. The audience is changing. I was taking a look at the data the other day that was about like video consumption in the US. I think it was hours per day. And look, the video consumption, has been fairly flat. The video consumption, not the linear TV consumption, that this one is down. So meaning that the audience is diversifying, going to other places, making that the consumption of video, it is the same, but not through the same channels. The second one that you touch is, of course, I think in digital, it's much. I think the attribution is cleaner, especially if you start to talk about like performance, like a DCM, like becomes like linear the attribution. So I think, in my opinion, everything that the supply side, like the natural and the linears, they will do to improve attribution and move away from the currents of CPM and impressions to start to talk about outcomes the way we talk about like in digital. I think everybody will welcome that. I don't think, I think if we compare like what some OTT players are offering, like some social channels are offering versus linear in terms of metrics, I think linear is behind. I think it's just like an older channel. I think in last news front, I was hearing like some partners offering things like, hey, the currency is not CPM anymore. The currency it's incremental point versus linear. I think that is closer to the behavior that we expect. So I feel that linear TV, it's behind. It's more limited also as a channel. Thinking about national, not like addressable, that I think they have like better control that. But yeah, I think that is a side that has to evolve for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's really critical to have that measurement for that high reach vehicle that is linear TV. And I think, you've touched on the times, incremental reach is really crucial in that, in terms of really optimizing the reach and frequency. The beauty of where TV has been moving in terms of this holistic video is ultimately providing the data that's needed to optimize against reach and frequency across all of those mediums, right? And that's really the goal as a holistic strategy. So you touched on a lot. I know you guys have done some stuff around OTT. Are you still implementing incremental reach across other channels as a tactic, or was that really just?
No, it is. I think one of the KPIs that we look for sure. So I think when we were, just giving one example, like when we were selecting what players to work with, like on OTT, we created like a scorecard that has some criteria, but one of these criteria was the incremental points over linear, because I think again goes back to the conjunction versus the isolation. TV, I think for QSR and a brand like Burger King with like such a huge footprint, linear TV continues to be a relevant piece of the media mix. But as I was saying that the audience is changing, but the video consumption is the same, we need to equalize for that. And then I think where to equalize and where it makes sense, there is like some criteria. Now we are at a point that we know which partners drive more restaurant visitation in our case. But again, part of this like scorecard, it is, okay, this partner versus our mix of linear, what is the incremental reach that they bring? So for sure, it's something that, as I was like saying in the beginning, when we did all this 30 years ago, was like the main thing that I was like, hey, I want to really study this and triple check everything in minimal detail, because we knew was something important.
Right. I totally agree. The totality of all of those together, as opposed to being in isolation. I mean, what we have found is a lot of analysis you and I have discussed a little bit. And what we're finding is it really is critical to have that measurement of linear in accordance with the rest of the cross channels, to make sure that you can really optimize against that reach and frequency, and understand share of voice and where you are driving it. And with being such a high reach vehicle, it's really played a really important role in the measurement that we're doing across platforms. So I totally agree in that.
I think you touch up an important point also. If you want to get like more detail, like
let's do it.
Like for instance, like capabilities of like controlling for frequency. Maybe for some brands, frequency is not an issue, maybe because they don't invest that much. So you kind of say, okay, like probably it's not like a priority for me. But when you have more like robust like media dollars, and you start to say, you know, like, are you over frequency? Are you in diminishing returns? Because if you are, that starts to become of waste, and that money could be going to something else to generate like a marginal ROI, like your next dollars if you make the trade-off. So it is important, and I think some players like on OTT start to give these more controls, like of frequency, as we were mentioning as one example of the capabilities behind.
Yeah. Jorge, you are speaking my language when you're talking that, because that's what we do pretty much on a weekly basis. We're looking at that for brands just like Burger King to see what that looks like, because until you control that, that's really what's going to drive the efficiencies to, again, free up those dollars and take them elsewhere. So yeah, we're speaking the same language. I love it.
Yeah, that's my life, trying to find what is the next thing that will drive better results.
Absolutely. So let's shift a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit about the current rebranding of Burger King. It's been the first in 20 years. And of course, I love the logo. It brings me back to childhood somewhat. And so, can you share a little bit more about the thought process on that? And then how it aligns with the overall goal, which, if I'm understanding not only from you, but when Fernando, your global CMO, speaks, really about infusing the brand with purpose. And we can break that down a little bit more, but can you just share a little bit more on from your perspective on that?
For sure. I think, again, something that was beautifully done by and led by the global team. We have like a design team like in-house, which helps a lot. They work with like a design agency, very good, but I think a lot of credit like to this design team that we have. They're like, on Fernando's reports, but like Fernando, like all these folks, I think they did an amazing work. When it comes about, as you guys can see, the new logo on my background here.
Love it.
Yeah, I think, look, I think the decision was, I think what Fernando means about like gives a purpose. We feel that this logo, it has a purpose. It's more aligned with what the brand stands for. It's like more playful. There is one definitely key element of all this rebranding, that it's to highlight what we do better, which is our own food and ingredients. So, and I think the rebrand, it goes along with everything that we have done in terms of like showcase our food. It's part of that pillar, that strategy. I think we did Moldy Whopper, probably about celebrating a year. I think it was February last year. So we did like Moldy Whopper. I think in September we did a campaign called like 100% Whopper. We did back, I think it was June we did like a partnership with like BT that we customized like a sneaker using the tie in the colors that we removed from the food. So it has been such a priority for us. We believe like real food tastes better. We have flame grilling. It's a differentiator for us. And I think the rebrand comes to give more canvas for us to be continue to play in that space. So if you take a look the logo, but probably you can see like some like the design, like the drawing, like is very playful, highlight a lot of the food. So I think that is the rationale of that, and we think the logo is great. So
yeah, and all the packaging of the food has changed too, and it's really bright and colorful, and it's different as well. But along with the food quality and really the ability to deliver this affordable, sustainable food, it encompasses even so much more than that. I mean, it's pretty impressive that this particular franchise is really focused on, very focused on diversity and inclusion, and really about restaurant design, the personalization, really making sure that, what are we going to recommend for this consumer? We know that they really like the Impossible Burger or such. From, all of that, then even a real big focus on, still big focus on soccer, and not only large soccer like MLS, but localized and really getting kids involved. And I think there's so much more to it. Can you share a little bit more about that? Because those are a lot of initiatives for, one wouldn't necessarily think as a common consumer that a QSR brand would be involved in all of these things, and that would encompass the rebranding.
Look, I think the true answer, it is sweat again of a lot of people. I think Burger King, it's not like our team, it's we don't have like big structures. We're not like much on like vertical. I get WhatsApp from Fernando Mas like quite often. So the team is really tied and unite. The good thing about that is allow us to move ultra fast. I was with a meeting the other day with Fernando, and Fernando was like, "Hey, I'm used to, if the idea is good, I can send me a napkin with the idea. I take it. Don't need to put fancy." So I think the fact that we are extremely nimble, unite, allow us to move faster and probably and do more. So I haven't counted how many campaigns we did last year, but I'm assuming it's more than one, probably like 2 or 3 per month, like probably.
Yeah, there's a lot of content creation for sure.
We never stop. I think the great thing about we love good ideas. It's very hard that if we love an idea, we will fight for internally and we'll make it happen. So imagine when someone came to the IT team internally with Whopper Detour, maybe like someone was like, hey, no, this is
you're crazy. What are you thinking?
Let's give up. But no, when we like one idea, we go until the end because we believe in the power of creation and power of ideas. So yes, we have been doing a lot, like on social as well. We did, I think, beautiful campaigns. I think you mentioned about like soccer. We did one called like Steven Age that we were playing with like famous players in delivery. But I think the good thing is that we always want to bring back to the brand and the business. Mori Whopper was to drive awareness for the fact that our food is real.
Right.
The Steven Age was to drive to the fact that you can order, it's for gamers, you can order delivery like anytime from us. So I think everything builds up back to the brand and to the business.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love the social campaign.
We don't sleep. There's always something to do. Always like a new idea. Yeah, we don't stop.
Pushing, just always pushing. Which that's why I've always kind of considered Burger King kind of the disruptor brand for these really unique and out of the box thoughts and thinking and campaigns. And I loved the social campaign where it was, not only come to Burger King like during COVID when restaurants were struggling, like go to McDonald's, go to other, basically support your local restaurants and such. So I really loved that. So I just have one more question, and I've got some questions coming in Q&A for you. But as the disruptors, I just have to ask, there was the Detour campaign, there was the Moldy Whopper, and then now it's like order yourself a future Whopper. Which one was your favorite?
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, I got.
Which one was your favorite of these more disruptive brands? The Moldy Whopper, or the Detour, or even the most recent where you order yourself a future Whopper? That's the most recent one I read. I was like, that's pretty cool.
It's so hard. I can give my opinion as an advertiser, maybe professional, than my personal skewed opinion.
Right.
I think Whopper Detour is such a case, to be honest. Like, I think that's why had like it scored like so many like awards. But the awards, I think, is just a reflection of what it was. I think it was really outside of the box with scale. Drove a bunch of results. So it's not only, oh, this is cool. Oh, these guys are telling you to McDonald's. Oh, they are competitive. I think that's just the storytelling. But there are things that we learn from Detour. I'm talking about like MarTech and that we use today.
Sure.
Things that we did with like ways that we learn from that, doing that. So there is also the intangible gains that goes behind. I think it's a beautiful campaign as a business as a whole. Absolutely. I think Modi, it's super brave, like first time that I saw, I was like, wow, this is so beautiful.
So was I.
The print were so beautiful. But my favorite one, I think, was Steven Age. I don't know if everybody like listening knows, but you guys can Google. It's a bit complicated to explain, but I think it was such a hack. I think first time that I was talking to Fernando a long ago, and he was like, hey, I think you will like this. And he kind of explained me, like talking.
Right.
I was like, man, whatever you want, count on me. I want to help. I want to be part. I want to do this. So I think it was great, and I think it was
awesome. Then, yeah, everyone should check it out for sure then. Okay, well, we got a few questions for you here, Jorge. So the first one that came in is, what measurement partners do you recommend?
For sure. I think I don't want to like disclose each one. I think more than giving names, I think one suggestion is like, what do you need? And maybe you will answer, hey, I need everything. I don't have anything. So I think the second question should be, what is more important for you then? Like, let's say you are starting today you don't have anything. So I think the second is like, what is more important for you today? Hey, maybe I only play on the e-commerce space. So I think partners like that can be like DCM and make the attribution like through, I don't know, clicks and deep links to measure your site. Maybe for you is that more important. If you are a have TV player, maybe a cross-screen measurement is key for you, because then goes back to what we were discussing. Do I have diminishing returns? Like, do I'm getting back like what I need? I am investing in the right partners. And then if you want to be more advanced and say, okay, what are the business outcomes that I'm getting from it? And I think you should think M&M, MTA, like if you are a brand that it's very established, your calendar and your media mix doesn't change, maybe you don't need something like real time. Maybe for you, start with something more strategic for you to learn M&M, and then you start to plug other things to become real time. I think it's really to think what is important for you now. Don't try to embrace everything at once, because it's a lot full of possibilities, but try to make a bridge. I'll start here because now that's the priority, then I'll go do this, go do that, and start. Then when you see you have an ecosystem of information attribution in place.
Yeah, totally. Because you can completely get overwhelmed with data if you're not careful. Okay. What are some strategies that you have adopted to conquest your competitors?
That's a good question.
It's a really great question.
That's a good question. And I think it's important because of the QSR, like the brands are such penetrated that I think it's there's a lot of cross shopping among brands. There are some non-loyalists. Yes, they go to brand to brand. I think the strategy, it has two. I think probably there are like two answers that come to my mind. I think one, you can do something disruptive, like Detour. That was about like we were basically telling like go to McDonald's, right? Like that was the catch. Of course, everybody tries to have one detour. Those ideas, they don't come that easy, but I think there are ways to be disruptive and use creative to conquer these like switchers. And I think when it comes more like on the media performance, I think it really goes back to like the audience and have data in place to understand out of like these switchers how much they make of your total like opportunity, like where they are going, and then like using partners to understand where they are going, if it has affinity with you, if it makes sense to go chase them.
Got it. Yep. It's really about understanding that share of voice too, and maybe where to go and where not to go. And we've certainly done a lot of stuff on that front, so we can talk about that further too. We'd love to. Okay, let's see. How do you collaborate with your agency partners, and what do you do in-house?
Great question. Great question. I think, look, today our reality, as I said, we are super nimble. The teams are small. So there is I would say there's like a more have duty on the agencies where like the structure is today. Of course, there are things like in-house, parts like CPG, like engineers, CRM, there are things in-house, but talk more about like these ideas in media. I think we have like a lot of partners like with agencies, vendors and partners in terms of attribution, partners for insights, for audience. And the collaboration, I think it's like, maybe you touch a key thing, that it's making them work like together. Like in our case, we have an agency that handles like media and other that handles creative, and we always try to bring them together and make them work as close as possible, because otherwise an idea like, for instance, like the tour would never have happened if it was just like, oh, these guys came with this creative idea, let them handle it. It's like, it doesn't work this way. So I think mainly these like big campaigns, it's everybody same boat, each one in its role, but being super collaborative.
Yeah, all hands on deck. Davina, do we have time for one more question, or are we?
Yeah, go for it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you do have one last question. I think it's a really good one. How do you partner with the delivery services like Ubereats and Doordash? And thinking that would come up anyway, but also in light of the fact you guys have your own white label delivery service.
For sure, we partner with, and they are good partners. We partner with, as you guys mentioned, like Ubereats, DoorDash, Grubhub, Postmates, all of them. They are great partners. They have been, we have been working. Everybody has been following how much delivery and online ordering in general for Coursera has grown and grew even more like last year, and will continue to be. I think it's just like a trend that was anticipated. We see in other parts of the world and other categories that are much more ahead of the US, but I think the US is on track. So we partner with all of them. There is I think the comma of this answer is that we also have our own white label platform. So if you go to bk.com or you have the app, you can order straight delivery from there. So for us, it's an ecosystem more complete, because we have the delivery partners that we do work in, we do campaigns with them. I was talking about Stephen Age here, the example that was in partnership with Ubereats, for instance, in the US. We have done other campaigns with other partners. So there is a work stream of working and investing with them, making offers, campaigns, so on. And there is also the work stream for us that we have our own delivery capability.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great. Thank you for that. I don't think there's any other questions that came in. So I think that's kind of a wrap for us. But Jorge, I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this valuable information with everyone. So it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for everything.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you guys both. I just really wanted to summarize, just for the marketers in the audience, kind of what I heard. Jorge, you had a lot of nuggets of information for your peers in the marketing space. Really, the clear definition of audiences, I think, a clear definition of the audience strategy, a unified approach, and being channel agnostic, importance of measuring business outcomes of everything you do. Test and learn, invest in MarTech, and incremental reach. Incremental reach being a really important metric as you look at the merging of all these different channels when it comes to video. So with that, I really, want to say thanks to both of you for today, and we'll look forward to seeing more Burger King throughout the Brand Innovators community in the future. Thanks, Jorge.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Mm-hmm. So I will get ready for our next speakers here in a second. I'm very excited to announce Bridget Nelson from Mass Mutual. She's the head of brand performance, and she'll be moderated. Hello, Bridget. She'll be moderated by our very own Lisa Nicolai from Ampersand, as well on the client partnerships team. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right, guys, take it away. Look forward to hearing what you have to say today. Thank you.
Hi, Bridget. Good to see you again.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. We were just having sirens going in the background because it's Wednesday and we have the siren check. So I was panicking, hoping those would be done before we started talking. But great. Welcome. I'm so excited to reconnect. I enjoyed our conversation last week and are looking forward to getting into it today. So with that, I would love for you to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your role at Mass Mutual, and then we'll jump into a deeper conversation.
That's great. So hi, everybody. My name is Bridget Nelson, and I head up brand performance at Mass Mutual. So you might be saying, hey, what the heck does that mean? Well, that's why I'm here to tell you. So how I would describe the brand performance team is we are the ones that are leaning into all of the data and analytics that come from our marketing efforts. So that could be through campaigns or other marketing efforts that we have in there. And really, the motto of our team is we look back so we can look forward. So we are trying to find, the stories in the data, combining it with other, insights and, industry trends that we're seeing to really tell this holistic narrative of what happened, what did we deliver, and really how can we learn from that to optimize and, work smarter, not harder in the future.
Perfect. I love that. And we're, you and I felt like really hit it off. I had such an enjoyable conversation with you. And one of the things I wanted to start off with was when I looked at your profile, first, love that you do storytelling through data. I mean, that's like our mantra. So I just thought that was a beautiful way to say it. But second, I realized that you started your role about 6 weeks before COVID hit. So you started a brand new role at the company, measuring brand performance, 6 weeks before COVID. So just, talk about like what that was. What did you do? How did you step into that?
So it's funny, reflecting back what was only a year ago and saying, wow, I started, right before, the world changed. And it was an interesting time in my life because I had also, welcomed a new baby into our household. So it's just coming back, from maternity leave, net new company, net new role, net new baby. So, it was interesting times. And it was funny because when I think about the team that I work with, and just some of the brilliant, amazing individuals, I always say it feels like, I've been in a long distance relationship with them. So even though we were physically in person, only for like what feels like a minute, the fact that we've, had to, adapt and learn like this, new communication style, like it's so odd to me that I can say, wow, it's only been a year, because I feel like, the broader team that I work with, such as the social team or, some of, the advertising teams, I do, feel like we've been in the trenches for ages together. So it's been great. It's been interesting.
Yeah, it's quite a ride, isn't it? It is really hard to believe that it's a year and I'm still sitting at my kitchen table. But, as you were saying, you're stepping into a new role. You've got to figure out what the next steps are in an industry that was already changing at the speed of light. So when you got in there and this started to change at the midpoint of March, what did you start to implement, or what did you stop? Was it something that you looked at holistically and said, let's do a dead stop in our communication to our customers, or did you just change that communication? What was kind of your first layer of approach to the changes?
So one of the things that I would say is, it was never a question of stopping, right? Mm-hmm. We wanted to have a presence, and we didn't want to go dark. So I think that, that was a very strong commitment, from the CMO and above. And that was just, our stance. So given that, we also needed to think through, well, we're not going dark, but what are we going to say? So, at that point, it was really a matter of we needed to lean in and pull in data and insights about our customers, right? Where are their minds right now? What is the right appropriate message that we should be, reassuring them against, during these uncertain times? So the other, interesting, insight that came out of this was there was no rule book or, playbook for, how do consumers react during times like this? So we really needed to lean in and be nimble and just really kind of almost on a day-to-day basis, get a pulse and sense of, where the consumers' mindsets were, where they were tracking, what they were feeling. Because again, it was just this great unknown. We didn't have those points to say, okay, seasonally, this is where we know our consumers are, which is, more traditional, at the brand level is, there's seasonal trends and they're fairly similar year over year, unless there's a huge disruption in the market. Well, there was a huge disruption in the world. So we just, had to be very agile, nimble, adjust, really lean into the data. And when I say the data, it could be anything. There's behavioral metrics and analytics that we leaned into. There's the consumer insights and sentiments that we really had to, draw on to, create that point of view, in warp speed, on that day-to-day basis.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that's part of the interesting change, I think, from the traditional world set that we were in of, you could plan a year out or a month out or 6 months out, which really has just changed fully our approach and how we have to think about markets and audiences. So having said that, some of the changes in the way that you're looking at your audiences, talk to me a little bit about how you're defining those audiences now. Are you looking at different audiences across the funnel? Kind of what's your thought about the audience approach?
So I think for us, it really starts with, identifying, who is it that we're going after and having a deep understanding of them. So we want to, walk through their shoes, right? So at, the highest brand level, right, we're really leaning into understanding what is the, business goals of Mass Mutual and who should we be talking to. So, given that, it's in the financial services space, we have, certain kind of, attributes that we look at on that consumer. And again, we have finite budgets. So, we really need to steer away from this idea of spraying and praying and being almost surgical and thoughtful about starting with that audience. Who are they and where are they? And then how can we, be smart about specific placements that really speak to them versus, again, spraying and praying. Like, we're not Walmart where, everybody's going to come in. We have to be, selective and smart so that each dollar we spend, we are trying to maximize the value of that dollar. And that's, at the channel level, at the creative level, having, the right message out there to them to then, start the conversation, with us, again, at the brand level.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think, having those changes and seeing how effective that's been for you in 2020 by really leaning into those audiences and those definitions and behaviors and being thoughtful about what's that message, how's the messaging. Of those sorts of changes you implemented from 2020, are you seeing things that you think will continue that you'll implement in 2021? Are these strong changes that you will keep? As far as you can tell, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but I mean the way that you're sort of thinking about flexibility of thinking and being able to be nimble.
So I think that one of the big things is, the big learning coming out of 2020 is this idea of having to be more nimble and, being more connected to the data on a more regular cadence. Shortening that timeline from it being quarterly planning is, embracing the idea that we might plan on a quarterly basis, but we shouldn't be afraid to pivot as we, get new insights. So I think that that's one of those learnings that, we had to lean in on that day-to-day basis. We had to lean in on that more micro level so we could, bubble up those insights. And I think for us, embracing that and not being afraid to say, okay, we may have to pivot and then pivot again and then pivot again. And maybe that's on a monthly basis, maybe that's on a yearly basis. But I think for us, it's kind of shaken up the idea of, not that it was ever set and forget, but really, away from that more set and forget, a time frame and addressing it on, those lower levels.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And I think it's creative and it's smart in the way that you have to approach that and look at the data to drive what you're doing and have the flexibility to pivot and move from one point to another, as again, there's no real playbook in our in our repertoire at this point, other than what we've learned from 2020 and what's moving into 2021. So those changes that you implemented, leading into audiences, thinking really strongly about where they are in the funnel, what's important, what do they need to hear? How are you measuring success? Is that, you can talk about that, Bridget, whether that's tangible or intangible. I mean, how are some of the ways that you said, wow, we really nailed that Was it, just starting to look at audiences? What were some of the strategies or tactics that you feel like are reflecting success for you and for MassMutual?
Yep. So it's a great question. And one of the things that, I would say is, the team at MassMutual has always been, customer centric. Like they have always, guided their strategy based on an audience first, and I think that the reason that they've been so, successful at this is because, again, it goes back, to the money, and they say, we don't have some of the gargantuan budgets that, some of the big players, in our space do. So we need to punch above our weight. And how do we do that more effectively? And, some of the people I work with are just, so intelligent, and they said, we need to understand our people first. So I think in terms of, measuring success, we do that via a couple of different vehicles. And that's, with some of the behavioral analytics, it's, thinking about, web traffic, it's thinking about, form submissions, or, some of the more, traditional lower funnel methods. Then there's also, with our creative, looking at brand lift and just ensuring that, we're seeing results that way. But I think where the real power comes in is the ability to look across all the different data sources you have, and then, apply that layer, with the consumer insights, and say, what was happening? What did we put out there? What did we see? And then, layering on that fact of, okay, and what is it, that the consumers think about this? So it's not just about, getting a number of impressions. Behind that impression is a person, and we can deliver an impression, but if we're delivering that impression and people are saying, oh, that's the worst ad I ever saw, or, oh my gosh, that makes me, think poorly of them, we need to layer in that context. So really, like, what's the whole narrative, so that we can then say, we saw this, people coming here, we delivered this. This is what they did, and this is what they thought. The power really comes in bringing all of those points together and saying, this is how we're impacting, that person on that individual level. This is where that person is consuming the media that we're serving up. And here's what they're doing afterwards, with that piece of, and this is what they thought of it.
Terrific. So really getting super precise about what you're doing, and then looking at various KPIs for impact, whether that's some of those tangible ones we're talking about, web visitation and so forth, or if it's just sort of a reaction, a behavioral reaction, or an emotional reaction to the messaging. So you're doing that moving forward. Are you beginning to segment your audiences? Are you thinking about audiences separately within the funnel? Talk a little bit about, you and I talked a little bit about it last week. There was and I loved your definition of working with various audiences and how you were looking at them separately.
So I think one of the, the biggest, things that we need to lean on is, depending on where someone is in the funnel, we'll traditionally reach them via different channels. So, with that being said, I would say the more data we have and the more we're able to lean in and cut that, we can also challenge that. We can blow that up. So, in a more traditional sense, it was a matter of, okay, if you start with awareness, some of those upper funnel tactics have been, traditionally your TVs, your radios, really kind of opening the conversation. With some of the data that, we now have on our hands, we can flip that on its head and say, okay, yes, it definitely delivers on that. And, we're seeing it impact, this KPI, or we're seeing it drive this traffic, or whatever that, specific objective we have aligned on as, what a measure of success is for that. From there, we can then say, okay, layering on those audience insights, and we say, okay, just say hypothetically, we want to speak to women, right? If we're able to look at, them and say, where are they watching TV, and what is the reaction it's eliciting, like on the TV channel level, we could say, actually, Bravo is great for opening the conversation with women, Bravo, the TV channel, but when a woman is watching Bravo, and again, I'm just making this as an anecdotal example up, we may be able to say, okay, when a woman is watching Bravo, the most we can expect from that placement on that channel is for her to know our brand's name. It's really great for awareness. However, because of that customer journey, she's just turning on Bravo for some popcorn for her brain, and she's really just like, give me some trash and I'm just going to watch it. Not that there's trash on Bravo, but for this story. However, that same woman, when she's watching, say, the Cooking Network and again, or the Food Network, she may be leaning forward a little bit. So we could then say, okay, we got her on Bravo. She knows our name. And because she's leaning forward a little bit more when she's watching the Food Network, maybe that's the time that we think about, teaching her about, where to go and buy, or how to kind of impact, her within the funnel differently than with a different TV placement. So it's really about kind of thinking through that customer journey, what they're doing where, and we're able to take some of these traditional methods and use them differently. I think the other thing that I would, layer into this is even just within the TV industry, how you buy TV now is evolving and changing. So it's not just, all linear, this is, you pay this is what you get. It's more, with some of, the connected TV and, the ability to actually buy against audiences is actually, catching up with, how the industry is thinking and how that customer first focus is. So I think that that's also really exciting to see, is as those changes are happening, our ability to action and, put some of those learnings into, account is a reality versus saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could figure out, what are those TV channels where you have, women, if that's your target, leaning forward and maybe more receptive to your message. We can do that now. And it's exciting to, see and be able to, again, like bring all of those different pieces together and then say, this is how, we should do that for, the strategy that, and we'll deploy that next week, because now it's more of a, a different cadence for how we're, deploying and activating these strategies.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And I think, the industry, we're trying to catch up to allowing to do that, which is a lot of the work that we do at my company. But once you're able to implement that and you're seeing the success metrics that you mentioned and looking at the gains you made from that, and you touched on a little bit, but I wanted just to kind of get a flavor a little deeper on how are you thinking about the cadence of that? Like, how often are you having to, or are you looking at that data? What's that time period like for you? Because I know that's kind of a challenge for a lot of us, the pace of the data, how far in advance do I react on the data? How are you managing that?
Yep. So again, not to be super ambiguous with my answer, but I think it also depends on the channel. I think it's a matter of, you don't want to act too early because you haven't reached critical mass, but it's also layering in the fact that, with channels like TV is you've got to build up the frequency first before you kind of, get real build on that. So if you pivot too quickly, you may have not hit the frequency levels yet, for you to be seeing, the real gain. So I think it's, there might be a longer time on that. Whereas with some of the digital channels where, you have more of, A/B testing capabilities that you can just deploy it and iterate almost in real time, I think it's a matter of you're able to do that, at a quicker pace. I think the other thing is layering into like what your objectives are and what your goals are. If you're trying to hit, just say, Q1 sales targets and, there's only, we're in February now, there's only, a month and a half left in Q1, you might, need to be, making some of those adjustments quicker. If it's, a higher level campaign where you're setting your targets, at an annual basis and you have, past seasonal insights to say, this is a time period when a lot of people are, they've set New Year's resolutions and they're doing their financial planning and they want to get better at that. That might be a time to kind of lean in and do that. So while I'm not saying we throw out everything about, seasonal insights, before it at least is a starting point for helping us set kind of like those gauges and say, how should we be thinking about this at the highest level? What is realistic for a time frame, on this specific channel to be maybe making some pivots or adjustments so that we can, get the business to where we want it to be.
Yeah, so it sounds like just with pretty much everything else that we're dealing with, there's no consistent one answer, right? It's changing and evolving as you're seeing the data and you're seeing, to your point, finding that mix of the right level of traditional understanding, channel, audience, all of those things that come together in the perfect storm, right? And then add on, the layer of complete unknown and things changing on a daily, weekly, moment by moment basis of engagement. It's no short challenge for our industry or yours for measuring brand performance. You kind of stepped into the perfect storm.
Hearing you say that, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of plates in the air. And it's funny because I don't always think of it necessarily as like, this crazy thing, like that's how my brain works. But now I'm like, wait a second, that's crazy.
It's a lot. And it's interesting to me. That's what was so fascinating and interesting to hear the perspective and the way that you're approaching the market, because, there 2 or 3 years ago, you really couldn't approach the market that way. So, just the change in the industry and the data that you're seeing and the way that you're able to optimize and take a story from that to build your presence is, such an evolution. And then this pandemic, I think, is just fast forwarded us so quickly to try to figure that out and maintain some pattern, which is really getting harder and harder to do. Change is becoming the only constant. So sounds like you've really mastered that. You guys have a great understanding at Mass. You know who your audiences are and how you want to speak to them. Is there a lot of, or any back and forth? Is the data informing a lot of your creative as well? I mean, it sounds like you have a lot of behavioral insight. So how is that playing into the messaging that you're doing?
So that's absolutely key for, part of it is, having that understanding of the audiences. What are their motivations? What are their desires? But then also overlaying, the fact of what do we want our brand to be, right? So all of those pieces have kind of come together and saying, this is what we want to provide. This is what we want to, do, having vetted that and ensuring that that's, a resident message with that audience, but then also, layering in the fact of, not just setting that and forgetting it and putting it on a shelf and just, having that as a tagline in the creative, the team, the creative team really kind of immerses themselves in that. What is a way that we can take these learnings? Like, again, I'll give a random example, but, if we know that, having stability, right, is a huge driver in the financial spaces. You don't, people get scared of volatile markets, obviously, like it's your money, so it's a really important thing. So for us, that, is part of, one of the pillars of our brand is, the strength and stability, that we have and, Mass Mutual has had over their long history. And then, the creative teams really kind of, wrap that through, bring those threads through, in all of the creative, because again, it's one thing for us to say Mass Mutual is a, strong and stable company. And then, we need that to be reflected in the creative, because that's who we are and we're that way, and ensuring that that's the message we're putting to the right audience. And it has been vetted. It has, it does resonate, and ensuring that that's, woven through. So I think that that's, another piece is just ensuring that we have that regular, pulse of, with our consumers and understanding, it's during the early days of the pandemic when that was something that, it needed reinforcement, because, even if you had people who were confident in, their money, like, and how they manage it and, their mindset towards it. The fact is, up was down, and it still kind of is, but just making sure that we're reestablishing and reassuring and, what were the fears on the minds of not just everybody, but our specific core target, and ensuring that that's being, amplified and, woven into, all of the creative is definitely part of the process.
Awesome. And so when you're doing that and you're pushing out that message and looking at your different audiences at different platforms and in different programs and all the things that you just talked about that we're trying to balance and figure out and and activate on. Is there any part of that, when you go forward with that, do you go full on? Do you do a little bit of test and learn? I mean, how do you dip your toe in once you've decided, here's the creative we want to give a reassuring message to see how that message is resonating? Do you just roll it out, or do you give a little bit of a test and learn period?
So I think it depends on, what type of, advertising, it is. So, we do, work to, do testing, prior, get feedback, vet the messages. But then also too, it depends on if this is, our brand message, ensuring that, that's more, vetted up front versus, just, rolling it out on TV and saying, see you later. I think that, with some of the capabilities on, say, a social channel where you can do more of that, A/B testing, we might have more options that we put in, A/B test it, and then, optimize, that way. So I think it again, just depends on what type of campaign it is, what the objective is, where we kind of lean in and do things, prior to flight versus in flight. And, again, the channel layers into that. So that's going to be my answer to everything is, the channel and the objective.
Well, because it is. But, I think it's interesting that sometimes in a perfect world, you can start with that message in a social platform or in that arena, and that resonates so well that you can then push it out to a bigger audience or to cross channels or cross platforms or the sort of thing. Do you see some similarities in messaging? Like, it's not always a different message, right? Sometimes it's a consistent message, or do you find it's very siloed by platform, by channel, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So we do, with the brand level campaigns, is we do have, the overarching message, and then we activate it, within the different channels, but it's all like, one cohesive campaign, a similar message, maybe there's tweaks in, imagery or, copywriting that, that's what we're looking to optimize. Mm-hmm. And then I would say is, outside of, some of, the brand campaigns, when we have, specific arms of the business, running other campaigns, for different objectives, is we also, try and weave, that in and, ensuring that there is a consistent experience when a consumer is receiving a message, from MassMutual, because, the reality is, I, Bridget Nelson, am a consumer. My role might be that I'm, the head of some, financial services, institutional, company. So I might see, messages from different arms of the business, from MassMutual, but I'm also watching Bravo, at nighttime. So just ensuring that, it's that cohesive, one voice, so to say. We do ensure that is, baked in, so to say.
Yeah, no, and it sounds, it's super interesting to me and very smart to the approach that you've taken and are implementing. And I love your analogy about, if you're in a certain, it could be the same consumer, the same audience, but they're in a different mindset at a different time, right? So if they are watching their program that they just, to your point, want to eat popcorn and relax, and they don't want to think about that, they could maybe see that same message later on. I think you said like the cooking channel, when they're leaning in and more open to just receiving that message. So that was kind of where my head was thinking, like, sometimes it is the same message, it's just a different area. Sometimes it's a different message. So again, more plates in the air. It's going to keep you working for a long time, though.
Right. And then the other complexity to this is, think about, 20 years ago when, 20 years, maybe it's 30 years ago, gosh. But, with mobile phones, right? Yeah. People now just aren't watching TV. You're not gathering your family together and watching, Friends and Seinfeld on NBC on Thursday nights. That's what I do with my family. It's a matter of, even if you're all sitting in the same room, you might have the TV on, but you also have your phone on, and your husband's also browsing on the iPad. So that idea too of, again, layering in that customer experience. And, it might be the same moment, but making sure that those cross-channel communications with the behavior that consumers are exhibiting are also kind of, you could be hitting a consumer, while they're watching your TV show, they could be seeing your mobile ad. So it's also just, ensuring that that deep understanding of the consumers, what they do, how they engage, but what else they're doing at the same time, because then you can, wrap around a message, or, there's a matter of, if someone did catch it on Bravo and, you opened the door with awareness, and then they're seeing something, on a social media channel, there's maybe a lower funnel action there. So again, it's kind of piecing these narratives and use cases together based on where the consumer is, how they think, and what they want to hear. Not what they want to hear, but, right. that reassuring message, throughout, I think, is also another, tactic to deploy on that experience track.
Yeah, right message, right time. So saying that, when you're thinking about frequency, when you're thinking about reach and those kind of traditional terms of benchmarks that you are still part of the conversation and part of our success metrics, right? Are you, and we solve across, multiple platforms, are you thinking about a specific frequency that you have to hit? Are you still using some traditional benchmarks? And if so, how are you benchmarking things? Are you looking at, long-term frequency goals? Are you looking at worried about too much across the fragmentation? There's so many places to be and have various measurements and their various messages. How are you thinking about frequency?
So I think for frequency, it's a funny question, right? Because if you hit someone at the, on the right day at the right time, and it's with, the right ad, and they sign up and buy something, that frequency, that one, that's all you needed, right? But the reality is it doesn't, always, work that way. And, you need to, it's almost like orchestrating a symphony, right? So you might start with, your TV, and you have to hit a certain frequency within TV, but the role of it there is, building it up, right? You're opening the door. And then you maybe are leaning on other channels once you've kind of primed the pump, so to say. And I think about consumers as, that, right. So, and then it could be different via different channels, again, depending on what the customer journey is. So I think for us, the idea of, we may look at frequency, at the channel level, but it's also, going into this bigger conversation of the journey and what the optimal journey looks like and where the consumers are. And that may be completely different based on who you are and where you are.
All about the customer journey. So we've got lots of questions coming in. Let me pivot and get some of these questions in. So you talked about punching above your weight class. Can you elaborate a little bit on other strategies you're embracing to do that?
So I think with that, the biggest, advice I have is the ability to understand your consumers, really walk in their shoes, and, just be super, super, super thoughtful about where they are, what they're doing, and having that great baseline of understanding for them. What are they doing when they're watching TV? Like coming up with those use cases and really, diving in deep there. And then also, thinking about, what your budget is and how you can spend. If, the majority of their time is, on one channel and another channel, how can you bring those pieces together? So I think that, again, it just goes back to knowing the consumer, really narrowing down into, who is it that you're trying to reach, and getting that, in-depth understanding of them. I think the other, a piece of that puzzle is, while, I say narrow it down, you also don't want to go after, a target that's, one-legged lighthouse keepers in the state of Maine, because you might only be talking to two people, and that's just going to be, really hard to reach. So I think that it's a balancing act of, narrowing it down to not too narrow, understanding them, and then really building strategies around, getting them the right messages in the right channels with that understanding of what's their experience or what's their journey, what's their mindset at that time.
So I'm hearing, to punch above your weight class, you have to be super clear about your audience definition. You've got to be super clear about your messaging, and you've got to be super clear about your environment. So really, as you're doing those 3 plates, that's helping you to target and get a bigger voice, a bigger share of voice than if you just could, as we keep saying, spray and break. If we could just throw it all out there. So we have another question. They wanted to know, who are your agency partners and what do you do in-house versus outsourced for your media?
So we work with Giant Spoon as our media partner. And what I would say, all of, the measurement and analytics we handle in-house. So, they're great with, helping us, build out the strategy and, do that. But we're also, it's a very, I definitely say it's a partnership, and that, with the in-house capabilities of, what we're building, there's a lot of power in that, because from our owned channels, our website, our social channel, our corporate social channel, we're able to dive in and bring those metrics in. So the ability to kind of have that holistic story, connecting lots of those data points, and then having, those conversations, with Giant Spoon about, what it is we're looking to achieve, what is the story that we're seeing, how can we lean in, based on any new learnings and insights that we have. And I think that 2020 was a great, example of, it being non-traditional. So the, ability to do that, again, in real time, was exciting, interesting, but, I'm such a data nerd that I'll also say it was fun to have experienced.
Awesome. Yeah, I really get to prove out some of the things you were thinking and strategies that you had in mind. Now you get to prove them out. Let's see. So we have you adopted any kind of tech platform internally? Like we have the AND platform, it's an end-to-end user platform, to make it easier to optimize and to be more flexible. Have you guys adopted any tech platforms yourself?
So no, not that I'm aware of.
Not designed. Yeah.
But a lot of, for our own channels, there is a lot of focus on, MarTech. I think that's an opportunity, area for us to really, lean in, and, potentially grow. I know it's, on the radar, for us this year, that's, an opportunity. But we're kind of building the plane, as we're flying it in the best kind of way. And I think it's almost like, that old saying, like, how long is a piece of string? Once you start seeing what you can do and you start pulling that string and it keeps going, and then you realize, wow. So, you're evolving and catching up. And then, that's when, you're able to pull in, some of these efficiency partners. So,
Yeah, good answer. Because it is building as you go and developing as you go. And with the amount of data that you have and are already using, it's just the next step in how do I start simplifying that process and taking some of those plates out of the air and putting them in, putting them a little easier. If there is such a thing as easier, I don't know. All right. So we also have a question that, I don't know if you were listening to the previous session, but the previous session with Burger King, they talked a little bit about incremental reach. So finding those people who are underexposed or that you want to move beyond, do you have a strategy or have you thought about using or how to drive incremental reach of your audiences? And that could be by platform, that could be by extending beyond who you're, any of those audiences that you feel that you're missing, if I'm reading the question correctly.
So, yeah, I think for that one, this question has me a little stumped. So what I would say is, it's the idea around, we know who we want to go after, right? But obviously, for that, the incremental reach, there are additional people that we're exposing. So I think for that, it's almost a matter of understanding, or mining that data to understand, is there a potentially high potential audience that, you know, isn't kind of on, you know, the where we're going after. So I would say that we do lean into that, and it's more like on a campaign by campaign basis. So far, what I would say is, you know, there's been nothing yet that we've kind of leaned in and say, okay, we have to, you know, start pursuing this, you know, but we are kind of keeping track of what are some new opportunities for us to, you know, potentially, you know, grow. So I think we're at the early stages of some of that. It's definitely a great area to, you know, again, you know, be challenging ourselves and making sure that, you know, we are keeping ourselves accountable to making sure that we're speaking to the people that we should be speaking to, and, you know, being inclusive there.
And I think you sort of answered that too when you were talking about how you're looking at frequency and thinking about the funnel and just that precise audience definition. That's sort of, you know, if I'm reading that question correctly. So I think you sort of answered it in just different buckets, right? Rather than just lumping it into incremental reach. And then I have one more, I think here, yeah, or two more. So and we usually get this question at some point. Any suggestions for vendors that would like to work with you?
So
they're gonna all call you immediately.
So, you know, with the vendors, I think it goes back to the idea of, you know, what's the objective? What are we looking to solve? So, you know, I think that, you know, there's a multitude, you know, of different, you know, vendors who, you know, all have, you know, specific strengths. So I think it's a matter of, you know, ensuring that, you know, in our toolkit, you know, we're, you know, leaning into and, you know, leveraging, you know, the relevant vendor to address, you know, the business question based on, you know, what it is. So, you know, I could sit here and rattle off, you know, 15 amazing partners, but I also think it's a matter of, you know, what's the business question that we're trying to solve, and, you know, who is, you know, an expert in this field that, you know, could also make us smarter and, you know, push the thinking there.
Yeah, what's the relevancy? So I just have a couple more questions, and these are not from the chat. These are just questions that I had for you. And Davina's on. Hi, Davina. I'm thinking of her because one of the questions that we typically like or used to ask pre-2020 was what kept you up at night. We've changed that because the list is too long. But I want to know, what gets you up in the morning? Like, what gets you really excited? You know, there's a lot of Groundhog Days with this thing. And what gets you up in the morning? What gets you pumping?
So again, I just go back to the fact that I'm such a data nerd. You know, I call myself a data detective. And the reality is, like, in my job, like, I get to pull all of these, you know, pieces of data together. It's like I have a cold case and I'm following new leads, and I might go down new, and it's exciting. I'm just so curious. And, you know, following data is a way for me to kind of like calm the curiosity, or actually feed into it, because then it's like you get some data and you're like, oh, I want more. So for me, you know, I love the fact that, you know, I have this job. I love that, you know, I get to do the things, you know, that I love to do, and you never know how it's going to look. So as crazy as 2020 was, the fact that we were in this kind of like, you know, virgin territory of how do we navigate this? It's like, hey, let's look at some data. Hey, how regularly should we look at some data? So I was, you know, able to do that. And the data nerd in me was just, you know, rejoicing. And again, I say that with complete sensitivity to the fact that, you know, this was a pandemic. I just see it as more of like the opportunity to be discovering new things. So
fantastic.
Just wanted to make sure that wasn't misconstrued.
Well, guys, we're going to have to wrap, Lisa. Sorry. I wish we had, I'm sure we could go on and ask you more questions for another hour, but we have another speaker teed up. So I'm getting notified that we want to make a quick transition, if that's okay. But just really quick, just to summarize, thank you so much, Bridget. What we heard, customer centric. I love it. Customer centric, customer journey, align your audience strategy with your customer journey, flexibility, optimize, right? Be nimble where you can. And I think all brands could invest more in MarTech as, you know, we get a little bit more sophisticated with all this craziness in this fragmented world of video. So Thank you for the time. Thank you, Lisa. Great job, guys. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Our next speaker is David Spencer. David, welcome. David joins us from General Motors. He's the Assistant Manager of Audience Buying Strategy at General Motors. Hi, David. Welcome.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you.
Good. And joining David is our Head of Auto Partnerships, Eric. How you doing? Welcome, Eric. We're very excited to hear from you guys today. General Motors is an important client of ours, so I'll let you guys take it away. Enjoy.
Oh, Eric, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, audio. You got to turn up your audio, probably.
Take two. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Got it.
One, how are you doing? Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
Awesome. So wanted to just touch base with you. And as Davina had introduced you, I just want to kind of quickly go through your background quickly with you. As your bio says, you lead advanced TV strategy and video testing across Chevrolet, Cadillac, GMC, and Buick. There's a lot of pieces that we can delve into in that, especially working for such storied and great brands. But you're also a member of the Media Rating Council and Mobile Marketing Association. But what I would like to do is actually just have you do a better job of actually explaining to the audience what you focus on and what is your interest within the role that you currently hold with General Motors.
Yes, I work on a central team that is brand agnostic across the brands that you mentioned and some other brands within GM as well. And I'm also market agnostic. So our group helps to kind of consult our international markets from a media perspective, make sure that we're doing things consistently in terms of strategy and measurement and planning and sharing with our international markets what we're doing here in the US, and likewise learning from our international markets and sharing with our brands here. Our team focuses mainly in the digital areas, so paid search, paid social, programmatic, and then the area of advanced TV. We also do a lot in terms of overarching investment across our brands and media strategy and measurement and all that kind of stuff. So I have the fortune of being able to learn from each of our brands, almost having competing brands within, an overarching GM brand, to be able to learn what's working well for Chevy and sharing that with Cadillac, and what's working well for GMC and sharing that with Buick, and vice versa, because they, as individual brands are very focused and have enough to do on their own that, it's hard to look over here and see, what's happening here and the testing that they're doing there.
Oh, that's awesome. Full transparency, I was on the agency side, and as Dave and we've spoken, I lived my life on the other side, working twice for GM in the tier 2 space throughout my career. So it's a pleasure. A lot of great news coming out of GM lately. And specifically, it feels like the whole organization is going through a bit of a transformation. How does this position and this engagement that you have, how does that line up with what Mary Barra and Deborah Wall have put forward as kind of the North Star for GM as an entity?
Great question. So the North Star, Mary makes it very simple. Mary has suggested that we need to put the customer at the center of everything that we do. And that sounds great, but when you really start to apply that to what you're doing every day, it helps to have that unifying principle to build your strategies from and better service our customers. And Deborah is fantastic and brilliant from a marketing perspective to be able to help guide the marketing and how that concept of putting the customer at the center of everything we do manifests itself in the marketing space. And, just last week, 2 weeks ago at CES, GM announced Exhibit Zero was the virtual experience that GM had. And that has everything to do with a new electric vehicle battery platform that we're launching called Ultium. And the idea here is that we're working towards zero congestion, zero crashes, zero emissions. That's what we've been working towards for a while. And now Deborah is bringing that to life from a marketing perspective with a whole campaign. And you'll see some spots in the Super Bowl and that talk through electric vehicles and where we're headed in this space.
No, that's awesome. Yes, and I believe that a couple of them have already been teased, and they look great. They're awesome. You talk a lot about it, looking at the customer journey and looking at the audience-based kind of perspective. What would you say are the areas of opportunity and the limitations within the current structure that we have, or that you are seeing regarding first and third-party data as well as execution?
Yeah, so limitations in terms of data, I mean, this is where I'll take it back to, that unifying principle. If we're putting the customer at the center of everything we do, and thinking about it from the industry side of things, we need to consider that experience for the consumer. And part of that experience is us protecting their privacy. We got it wrong in the digital space. And that just happened out of technology was advancing much faster than what brands could really keep up with, and it got out of control. Privacy was compromised. Fraud grew to historic levels. And generally speaking, it's been a pretty bad experience from a consumer perspective. So much so that regulators have gotten involved in enforcing, rules that are supposed to be helping protect the privacy of the consumer, but also are putting a real big strain on the advertising industry. So, from a data perspective in the TV world, that's something that we have an opportunity as an industry to kind of rethink how we're approaching this space. And yes, the technology has advanced rapidly within television, but the advertising has not. And we are slowly getting there and slowly testing, slowly working on different things with that idea in mind, that we don't want to make the same mistakes that we made in the digital space 10 years ago, and really start to think about it from a consumer lens.
That's a wonderful perspective. As coming and growing up through the digital boom, and trying to determine how we do the best for kind of the handoff and the customer journey from a digital perspective, I would say that one of the things that we as Ampersand really enjoy and really uphold is the PII compliance, right? To make sure that any information that we bring to our insights and our observations of the data is done in a way that does protect the consumer. The benefit of that on our side is more of being able to be the most effective in a market not just the most efficient. And by looking at it from a consumer perspective, we can say, great, what are these people watching? How are they consuming television and episodic video, whether it is on a linear basis or an advanced TV perspective? And that allows marketers like you to be able to get closer to the consumer. And one of the things that when we spoke earlier, we had talked about right message, right place, right time, right? And how you are able to take a lot of these disparate data sources and bring them into a cohesive strategy. So I guess I would like to ask you about, how do you take those first party and third party, GM's got a wonderful CRM system and a database. How do you bring those two together and meld those two to not only retain customers, but also look at how you are conquesting and getting more people into the fold?
Good question. It's definitely a work in progress. And, we have a fantastic agency partner in Dentsu, and they've got a platform called M1 that helps to make many of the one-to-one connections with our media partners, and be able to apply that additional layer of data that we understand about the customer. But again, getting back to privacy, there are limitations there, and there are major limitations if we truly want to protect consumer privacy. And that's what's holding advertising back from being maybe as effective as it can be, future state. But we're doing everything we can to put things in place that allow us to gain as much insights as we can from the existing data that we have, and as much data as M1 has from the existing platforms that it works with from a digital and television and media perspective, publisher perspective, and marrying those two things so that we can create an effective media plan and an effective reach and scale that in a meaningful way.
No, that's awesome. That's a great perspective. In the previous conversation, Bridget was talking a little bit about her interest in data and kind of coined herself as a data nerd. I think we look back at as growing up in the 80s, and that the nerd had a negative connotation. It seems to have this burgeoning piece of it, and quite honestly, I put myself in that market, in that category as well, geeking out on the information and creating insights. What over the course of your engagement, what has been kind of the driving force to look into the data and get to that point of adopting the audience-based buying and measurement across GM?
So, not to simplify it too much, but it just makes sense. So the data, right? The data is there. We know a lot about our customers. The data science tools are there. The data expertise is there. And it's really just making sense of it all and making sure that we're looking at our customers the right way, looking at their motivations and considering every aspect of the auto shopping experience, and then meeting their demand with the proper messaging that suggests that we're the right brand for them and at the right time. You mentioned it earlier, right time, right message. And really from a data perspective, what we want to try and do is be smarter about everything that we're doing in media. So, we're spending a lot of time, money, effort on developing these fantastic target audiences and knowing every aspect of every point during the consumer purchase cycle for automotive. And then it's just applying that to the media world, but doing so in a meaningful way. And what I mean by that is a lot of what I do in my role is consider from putting the customer at the center of everything we do, um, a concept of utility and how is this going to be useful for the consumer and our customer. And if we think about advertising in that way, and you can't always do that, but if you start with that and think about, okay, in our cadence of communications with this customer, showing them the same television ad 100 times on a cable network is not going to make a better experience for the customer, and it's not a useful exchange between any GM brand and that customer. So how can we be smarter about which ads we're serving to them, what message we put in front of them based on their specific motivations and their stage of life and what they're going through and what they might need, and income and where they're at in terms of what kind of vehicle they would be most interested in, and doing so in a way that we're not irritating them. So
Yeah, no.
In the advanced TV space, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's definitely a key, and not getting to the point of oversaturating a frequency to where you have a negative connotation potentially with the brand because of the repetition. How are you looking at those traditional metrics across platform when it comes to reach, frequency, and potentially even like deduplicated reach?
Right now, it's really kind of cobbling that together. So, and that's just a limitation of the state of the technology in this space right now. Speaking specifically about the video space across OTT, CTV, linear television, AVODs, SVODs, whatever, we are looking at different measurement sources for each of these areas, and then figuring out where there's overlap. And really, it's about, and some of this is manual, but it's about coordination between the buying channels and making sure that if we're, working with network A over here, that we're not going out programmatically and buying network A as well over here, and then buying them in CTV separately from one another, so that the ads are all on top of each other. So we may have frequency of 10 here, but then 20 over here, 15 here, total of 50, 100 frequency when you're talking about it in aggregate. So that's just something that as technology advances, that's a problem that will get solved. I'm confident of that. It's just going to take some time, and it's going to take experimenting on our side with different types of technology that kind of account for that kind of thing. So your platform for sure is that's we're headed in the right direction, right? With ampersand and that's the type of thing that if we can have some sort of unifying ad delivery technology, and it doesn't necessarily mean one, but just a standard that we can apply across the different video channels that we're running, then measurement becomes a whole lot easier, because you're dealing with one platform serving different ads across different channels. And now we can start to take that data from that one source and apply other data to help us better understand who we're reaching.
So there are two key items that you mentioned in there that give me a little bit of the chills. One is experimentation. And then also, quite honestly, the realization and the understanding that as you look at this from a consumer-based perspective, the funding source, which is so prevalent within the automotive space, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the consumer is not identifying the fact that it's a different funding source, so therefore they should be receiving a different message, right? It's all a message that comes out from General Motors, whether it is a Cadillac or a Buick or a GMC ad or a Chevrolet ad. And harkens back a little bit to the coordination that whether it was from a tier 2 and a tier 1.5, which is regional dollars spent in a retail manner, how the coordination worked. And one of the things that I always loved about the environment from GM was the ability to experiment and test and learn. If you can take a few seconds and kind of walk through what your perspective is on this, and maybe with some examples of how you go about testing and learning and experimenting and determining the appropriate KPIs as you go through that process.
Yeah, from a General Motors perspective, you're right. General Motors is very receptive to testing, and General Motors hasn't always talked about it. And that's something that I was surprised by when I got to General Motors, is the amount of testing that was happening, because you just never saw General Motors in the trades in terms of, forward thinking and testing, when in reality, behind the scenes, it was always happening. Now, since Deborah Wall has taken on her new role as CMO globally, its testing has kind of hit warp speed, and we're looking in all areas and figuring out what the right way forward for us is in a lot of these very complex areas that have tremendous potential. Dynamic creative is an area that has limitless potential, but if done lazily, or you're not diving in all the way, and you're only dipping your toe in, it's not going to work. You're not going to be effective with dynamic creative, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of testing to start to figure out what works best for your brands. In the area of advanced TV, we are doing all kinds of testing, testing of ACR data, to better understand what potential that has, whether it be through smart television manufacturers like Samsung, or streaming video devices like Roku, or digital platforms and SVODs like Hulu. All areas where we're trying to figure out the most optimal approach in every individual area, and then where are the synergies, and where can we find similarities enough that we can draw insights across channels, and what's our future state of where we think this space is going to be in 3 to 5 years. And some of our testing aligns with that and some of it does not. It's just a matter of this test may lead to another area that we weren't thinking about before, and another aha that allows us to push forward in a new direction. But all of it is, I will say, incremental, and the testing isn't always successful, and that's a big piece of this, and that's something that Deborah has stressed and emphasized is, she goes with the mindset of how do we learn faster. So, it's not going to be perfect. The setup may not be perfect. We may not be that technology may not be ready for us, but let's test it anyway. It may only be in 10 million homes, but let's test it and figure out the viability so we can keep pushing forward and keep ahead of the competitors.
And that's awesome. We used to have a phrase that was, we were building the plane while we were flying,
yeah.
right? And it's just, it invokes a culture and a freedom to do things that, quite honestly, may or may not succeed. But there's always a lesson to come from that. So that is a great piece of this. You mentioned insights previously. What are there any consumer insights over, say, this past year, which has been historically challenging, as well as showing a lot of opportunity? Are there any consumer insights that you have gleaned that you feel are that quite honestly surprised you, that you didn't see that were coming?
I was surprised at how fast the mass adapted to basically video consumption, video calls, technology. When everyone was forced into it based on quarantining, I guess I underestimated the overall ability, and I'm talking of people that haven't previously been working in technology. I mean, even for myself, who lives and breathes the digital and advanced TV space, I still went through a big learning curve in March and April in terms of just conducting video meetings. And the microphone's not working, or the video's not turning on, or
you're on mute when you try to start a panel.
Just like that, yeah. Yeah, right. So I think, and I think that has helped everyone be more receptive to this whole advanced TV space, because it's an area where now people feel much more comfortable talking through a laptop, talking through a computer. They were forced to get into it and forced to move in that direction. So that's from a consumer insight perspective. And then from an advertising perspective, just jumping into new ways to communicate with consumers. We've built something out. It started with Cadillac Live, which is an entirely virtual experience where you can call and talk to a Cadillac specialist one-on-one, and they'll give you a tour of whatever Cadillac vehicle you want. We've just launched that same experience for Chevrolet, largely driven by, people are largely home now. They're technology savvy for the most part. They've got the devices all hooked up. They've got the internet speed that they need, and they've learned how to go through an experience differently than we've done for decades. And so let's figure out how we can accommodate the consumer in a way that's more convenient for them and better for their brand experience. And that should down the road lead to inevitably more sales and a better perception of our brands.
No, and that's a great point. And as we look at focus group of one, I look at my family, and I've got 3 kids, and my youngest is 8, and she is a whiz now on Zoom and all of this technology things that quite honestly in the past has been a little bit later in life, and so I think that there's some great points that you touch on in there. We're talking about consumer habits and how comfortable different experiences and how people are comfortable with technology, and also want to make sure that the experience that they're receiving from advertisers, as well as such as yourself, is in almost that personalized way. I mean, quite honestly, you guys everybody here is looking into my house, as is your house, and there may be a dog, there may be a kid.
Yes.
So you look at those things, and it's a connection piece with the consumers that is a much more personal level that I think than what has ever been out there before, whether it's a spray and pray type of approach, and now we'll be able to laser focus on what you're doing. There was one other question that I wanted to kind of borrow from the previous one, which we kind of talked about. But what kind of gets you up in the morning to be excited about going to work in the morning and making a difference in where GM's going?
Yeah, the right now it's the potential of this whole space, and it's almost like a giant whiteboard that we have an opportunity to determine how to navigate the advanced TV world for the next 2 decades. And we're just scratching the surface of targeting capabilities of television manufacturers, the actual capabilities of the TVs, and the what kind of processing power they have inside, advertising platforms and what they can do with data and serving of ads across all platforms. There is so much potential to, exponentially get more effective with our advertising. And it's in an area now, it's not a new area like digital was. This is TV, and everyone's got them, and they're only getting bigger, and everyone is consuming more. I think I saw a stat that consumers now are in 2020 increased their media usage time by an hour, full hour.
I saw that. Yep.
So consumers are there, money is there, technology is getting there. So we just gotta tie it all together, and I really do think that we're in a spot right now where we're setting the foundation for the next couple decades.
Well, it's exciting to go along on the journey with you on that one.
Yeah.
I did want to open it up to a couple of questions that I did have as we look at kind of wrapping up our time. And apologies, I'm reading from the left screen over here. With GM focused squarely on EV, i.e. everyone in electric vehicles, how is GM furthering the education process of getting consumers to adapt to charging stations in their garages, utility of charging, or is that even necessary? Will it grow organically?
Oh, it's necessary. It's definitely necessary. There's something that we call range anxiety that is a big barrier to electric vehicles still, and that is, people are worried that, well, what happens if I don't get to a charging station in time? And it's a big problem. But there are things that are happening from a technology perspective and a product perspective that I don't want the GM lawyers after me, so I'm not going to talk about it, that are working to address a lot of that. And then from a marketing perspective, we're thinking about that, and we're thinking about different ways that we can help consumers better understand how electric vehicles work. What is the charging station infrastructure moving forward? How is that growing? What can we expect in the next 2 years? And as we get further down the road of more and more of our vehicles becoming EV, yes, infrastructure is going to grow organically as more and more people buy electric vehicles. Battery technology is going to get better. people are going to get more familiar with it when your neighbor's driving one and they invite you over. But we're definitely going to take a leader position on that, and have resources that, again, I can't get into the resources that we're working on right now, but resources that will be available for people to ask a question at any time. And of course, any of our current electric vehicles, Bolt is one, Lyric is one, the new Hummer. You can always go to one of our websites, and they'll have plenty of information about exactly what those vehicles are capable of, and what you need in terms of a charging station. And they're even making you don't necessarily need a charging station. Just an outlet will do, but it just takes a little longer to do.
Well, it's an exciting time to be in the industry, I have to say, looking at this pivot and transition. Getting back a bit to the advertising and advanced TV piece of it, what audience tactics is GM adopting to align the customer journey across corporate and dealer marketing efforts?
Yeah, that's a very complicated question. So dealers, we've got kind of handoffs from tier 1 to tier 1.5 to tier 2 to tier 3, and we have very well-defined approaches in terms of what we're trying to accomplish with our tier 1 messaging, what we're trying to accomplish with our tier 2 messaging, and what we're trying to accomplish with our tier 3 messaging. Now, we've got over 4,000 dealers, so trying to manage the media and creative of dealers is a very difficult thing to do. But there are ways in which we're sharing, data and we're understanding what they're doing and better understanding how that works together with our tier 1 and tier 2, so that we can be smarter about that moving forward.
No, that's great. And with the appearance of Davina, I think that we are running out of time. So I wanted to say thank you, Dave. It has been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and also to get your insights on where you want to lean in from a GM perspective. And I appreciate the valuable information that you have shared. So Davina, I believe it's back to you, but thank you, Dave, for your time.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Davina.
Great session. And I've been recapping each one, just kind of what I heard for some highlights for the marketers in the audience. And it sounds like GM's doing an awesome job with creating audiences. You feel really good about your audience strategy and, understanding the customer journey. I think the earlier speakers were still building that and figuring that out. And you guys seem to be a little bit further down the path there. A lot of experimentation, and according to Deborah Wall, she'd like to see the experimentation happen a little bit faster, which we all would. But my favorite, of course, just with my Ampersand hat was one of the challenges you're still facing is this frequency issue. And I'm happy to hear that you see the AND platform as a potential solution for that as we kind of build that and with you guys as a partner with us. So thank you so much for the time. And
thank you.
Yeah, so please, everybody, stay. We have 2 more speakers. Thank you, guys. 2 more speakers that you will not want to miss. The next speaker is Graciela Benveniste. Graciela joins us as the global head of media for BlackRock. She's joined by Jen Brenner, a partner of mine on the client partnerships team. And so she'll be moderating the session, but please hold on. We have one more session at the end of the day after Graciela and Jen, which is our president, Andrew Ward, along with Costa from OMD. So thanks, Jen and Graciela.
Thank you, Davina. Sure, thank you. Hi, Graciela, nice to see you again. I think you might have mute on. I can't hear you. I know. It's a common theme today.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And
how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. As you guys know, or as Graciela and Davina knows, I'm in New Jersey today. And about 20 minutes ago, everybody started to use their snowblowers at the same time. So there's an orchestra of snowblowers and plows outside. So I will try to mute if it gets really loud.
Sounds pretty good right now.
Good. I guess that's what happens when you have 2 feet of snow.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's so nice to chat with you again. I'm so excited to hear more on your perspective around the future of media and audiences and measurement. I think a great place to start is for you to talk about BlackRock and your role within the organization and kind of like your day-to-day and how you attack, what's in front of you.
Yeah, so I've been with BlackRock for the past couple of years, and I'm the head of global media. So that means that my team basically runs a global center of excellence for media best practices that all markets and regions around the world are working with us on, and are working with us on implementing them and on strategizing around them. And then we also lead paid media planning and buying for our corporate brand in the US.
Great, interesting. So you said that part of your role is to determine best practices and implement them. In general, that's no small feat given all of the constant change in the video landscape. How do you go about approaching this? Like, do you lead with audiences? Do you lean a lot on test and learn and go by findings? Like, sort of, how do you approach implementing best practices and defining them?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two. I think that the audience always needs to lead the strategy, and it needs to be at the center of it all, and at the center of any paid, owned, and earned strategy and journey. So, we need to think of who our audience is in order to best serve their needs. And obviously this becomes even more relevant in a global role because audiences are different around the world, right? They don't have the same habits in different markets around the world. So that's where we work really closely with our partners in other markets. And yes, at this day and age, obviously measurement and data, audience data is in our fingertips. So whatever it is that we're setting out to do, and whatever our thinking is in the beginning of any campaign, can be course corrected or revised according to data and measurement that we get from our audiences, interaction and experience with our content and our messaging. So a little bit of both, really.
Okay. And so globally, scaling something globally, taking what's working well in the US and applying that to other regions and other countries. How do you choose what to take and try to scale it? Like, what translates best, or does nothing really translate? It's kind of like a new slate every time.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we translate what's being done in the US, because to your point, and to the point we just talked about regarding audiences, these are different. Audiences are different in each market, and there's different thinking and sometimes different objectives to a certain extent in each market. So it's not about taking something that's being done in the US and scaling it. I would say that global content development or global strategies are developed alongside our regional and local counterparts. So it's not a US tactic or a US idea that's translated. It's more something that's co-developed by partners that span geographic borders. And at this day and age, actually, this is easier to do, right? With all the video conferencing and all that. And that's how, that's what scalability is about for us. It is not US tactics being translated. I mean, sometimes it can be. Sometimes content can be translated to a certain extent, but yeah, in general, we're trying to work collaboratively with our local and regional counterparts to develop something which takes under consideration their needs as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it's probably a lot of communication and a lot of
Yes.
time to get it done. And I would imagine, not hopping on planes, but this virtual world is definitely the fact that everybody's just doing it is probably making things easier despite time differences or whatever.
Yeah, you don't waste any time on planes anymore.
No. So with that said, and just thinking about BlackRock for a minute, like it seems as though BlackRock has a strong commitment to sustainability, and not just sustainability in terms of helping clients invest in a sustainable way, but also helping clients learn to navigate a transition toward net zero emissions. And those seem to be two very clear focuses. Like if you just even read a little bit about, the letter to the CEOs and all the interesting work and all the content that BlackRock is putting out, how do you speak to audiences, in media and against the corporate brand for this sustainable message? Like, how do you look at audiences with regard to this sustainability concept?
I mean, I don't think that that differs from the way we look at audiences in general. I think the notion of sustainability is, especially the past year, is relevant to everyone, really. So, there is a specific audience we want to reach, and we want to make sure that this messaging is communicated to all of them. So, again, it's more about making sure that we communicate. This is a message that translates across geographies, right? This is an example of something that is relevant around the world. So it's more about using the tactics to reach as many people as possible and have that two-way communication, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine, with this global pandemic that everybody's been facing, this idea of sustainable investing in general just resonates, with a broader population base. So that does make
I would certainly hope so. Yeah.
And then every corporation, I'm sure, does have some sort of focus or mission toward, climate change and doing better and doing good. So it's interesting stuff, though, because you see it all through a global lens, which there's probably more in common within the countries than not, right? So
yeah, as far as that goes, I think that definitely the interest spans borders, and it's very much a global focus of ours.
Yeah. And then I know we're talking about BlackRock, but you did spend many years at L'Oreal and years before that on the agency side. I'm curious about how your experiences have sort of led to how you go about your day-to-day role with regard to, leading a global media team.
Yeah, I think that my experience has always been in global and matrixed companies. So although the categories and the industries are different, the rules of the engagement and the way these companies operate have a lot of similarities. As far as the only difference I would say is that L'Oreal is a company whose headquarters are in Paris, whereas BlackRock is very much headquartered in New York. So different cultures, if you will, but all the companies, and I used to work on the Colgate-Palmolive account before. All the companies I've worked on and for have a really solid global footprint. And again, I think that every time I'm called to do a global role, what's really important is taking under consideration the local nuances. And to the conversation we had before, not trying to develop something in the US or in France for that matter, or in London, which you then try to translate. It's more about making sure you bring people along for the ride, and it's a partnership.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Transitioning to a second to the idea of matrix organizations, a lot of what we're talking about within, moving video and TV forward has to do with innovation and supporting those people who are hand raisers. They're trying to change the way an organization has classically approached media. and they're trying to get buy-in, for new projects, new test and learn, and any sort of new audience sort of approaches. My question to you on that would be like, what tools do you rely on to help you with that? Is it measurement? Is it communication with, is it your agency? Is it your partners? How do you go about, pulling together communication needed to sort of innovate and sell up within the organization?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think innovation is very, very much happens on there is a sequence of events, right? It's developing a business case. Why pursuing something innovative is going to have an impact to the business. Then I think what works a lot in most companies I've worked for is piloting it. So perhaps, it is not something that's a full-blown innovative activation from the get-go with a lot of budget behind it. But as long as there is, a level of budget that allows for measurement, it can work as a pilot for a product, for a brand, for a market. And then if it proves to be successful, then it can scale. Obviously, it takes a lot from the company as well to be willing to take risks, because they're pilots, right? So there is a chance that the outcome is not going to be exactly what everyone was expecting. So it's about the company wanting to take risks and also encouraging and empowering teams to test and learn and mostly learn, because that in and of itself is very, very helpful for any future endeavor.
Yeah, I feel as though your opinion on that is, it resonates across almost every category.
Yeah, I think so.
The timeliness of learnings, right? Everybody wants to learn faster. I think it just came up in Eric's panel, and I think that concept, everybody's got the stomach for innovation because they really are hungry for learnings.
Yes.
To apply those learnings and learn to improve efficiencies and be more effective with media.
And how much more relevant is it nowadays, right? When the media landscape is changing so rapidly, we need to be able to learn, because the way we were doing media a year ago is not the same what we're doing today.
I agree, to learn and to pivot quickly, or as quickly as possible. I wanted to also ask you about the role of data. I know that everything is very privacy compliant at Ampersand. We also have a strong focus on behalf of our client base and our subscribers to focus on privacy compliancy. But with regard to data, you guys are probably rich in first party data. Do you utilize data a lot in your day-to-day role? Or does the organization utilize data in order to sort of hone its audience practice, or in regard to measurement and improvements?
I think we definitely, the first thing I would say is that we use data like everyone in a very privacy compliant way. We definitely use it for measurement and to be able to get learnings. And we work with partners like you to use third-party and second-party data with the view and the objective of improving the experience of our audiences, and with the objective of making it as relevant and useful to them as possible. Different markets are at different stages in terms of data utilization. And I would say we're nowhere near perfect in terms of how we use the data. Everyone talks about data, but it's a really hard nut to crack and to get right. So we're on that journey as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I feel as though we're all on that journey together as far as the best use cases for data, and not just data for the sake of data, but data to actually learn and do and be more effective with regard to business outcomes and relevancy, engagement. At Ampersand, we focus a lot on relevancy and audiences and reach and frequency and, reflecting the way folks are consuming, content. And so, our everyday is to simplify that and automate that as much as possible, because I think that we're all trying to get there. We're all trying to, crack that nut and push everything forward with regard to just, the future of TV and engagement.
And I think that what you guys do, you do a really good job with data, because it's also, you provide a way to measure TV that is definitely more data driven than it used to be. It's more than the GRP. So it makes that channel more valuable from both a targeting standpoint and also a learning standpoint.
Yeah, we try. I'm so glad you see that. I feel that in everything that we do, and it's partners like BlackRock and of the world that are trying to sort of hone an audience practice, and then have a goal and align on a goal with us for a mission, and having that stomach to innovate, but also who are looking for learnings and also understand and also just want to activate in a more efficient way, across screens. So we're close to time. I wanted to ask you 2 quick questions just about the future and looking forward. And it's not necessarily just going to be like what inspires you when you wake up in the morning, but I think we started out this question is, if we can look at your day-to-day 2 years and then 5 years from now, how would they be different? But I'm going to change it because I feel like that's too far in the future and it could be like something drastically different.
I hope I'm not home all the time. That's all I'm going to say. I hope I'm not in this chair all the time.
But maybe 6 months from now, things are slowly going to come back to normal. How do you feel about approaching your day-to-day mission at BlackRock?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk, like you talk about 6 months from now, and the only thing I can think of is more about the future of work, right? And how we are all going to work together. So I am looking forward to collaboration opportunities. I'm intrigued to see how people, including myself, are going to leverage the time when we're all going to be physically in the same space. And I'm wondering if it's going to be an opportunity to ideate and to innovate and to workshop things and have meaningful meetings and gatherings of teams, and then whether we use the time we are in our own spaces to work and to do the meetings and what we're doing on our daily jobs right now. But I am looking forward to having that social aspect of work back, because I personally find a lot of value in it, and I think that there is a lot to be gained by corridor conversations and serendipitous meetings and people writing on whiteboards. And it may be once a week, it may be twice a week, who knows? But I'm personally looking forward to that. Hopefully it happens.
Couldn't agree more. That's sort of when the magic happens sometimes, and also a little bit of fun. Although we're learning on Zoom a lot more too. So
sure.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you both. You guys, this was a great session. Just a few summary points. What I heard, Graciela, is that global isn't a one size fits all. You really need to customize the approach for the company, the country, and partner with your local partners to do it right. And I think that makes it a big challenge for you as you think about your audience approach. You're looking for a lot more customization and two-way communication with broad reach. And the final thing was just that it's, the importance of TV measurement, and thanks for the ampersand plug, but going beyond GRPs with business outcomes being a priority, and just test and learn and pivot. So thank you so much, both of you guys.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to our next session.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Well, I am very happy to introduce our next session, our final session. Please stick around because Costa and Andrew are great. They've known each other for a very long time. So I think you'll find it a very informative and entertaining session. So with that, I want to introduce Costa. Costa is a Senior Director and Data and Tech Consultant at OMD. Welcome, Costa. He's got a lot of big brands under his responsibility. And then we also have Andrew Ward, our president of Ampersand. Thank you, our fearless leader. Thanks, Andrew and Costa. Let you guys take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Davina. Thank you. Costa, as always, good to see you.
Good to see you, Andrew.
Appreciate the opportunity to chat and connect here a little bit today. And, you know, I think as I listen to the sessions throughout the day, it reminds me that we sit at an interesting time in our business. And, you know, I sort of put the consumer at the center of that evolution. At the end of the day, you see the convergence of video and technology, putting the viewer in control of how, where, and when they access their favorite programming. It used to be in the days gone by when I was at Y&R more years ago than I care to admit. The idea of putting a media plan in place was a pretty simple process. You put a signpost in primetime television and brands could expect audiences to come to them. Well, now human attention is really a scarce economic resource, and brands now need to find and follow audiences, engage with those audiences across time, device, and location. And as a result, especially in the TV world, in the TV marketplace, traditional business models are now evolving. And those business models are evolving around the introduction of richer data, more precise targeting, addressable capabilities, more advanced measurement, as Graciela just spoke about from BlackRock. And so let's spend a little time, I think in light of your background, I feel that you're in the engine room of a lot of the evolution as it relates to data and measurement. And so that's what we're going to spend a good bit of our time today talking about. What are the opportunities and challenges, privacy and otherwise, in that space as we think about advanced data and richer brand measurement. So that being said, why don't you give we've had the good fortune of working together for a number of years. Why don't you give the audience a little bit of a flavor of your background, whether it's the early pioneering work you did with Experian and thinking about blind matching and some of the work you did with Nielsen Innovation Lab that sort of prepared you to sit at that intersection today within the Omnicom environment. Give us a little bit of a flavor of that background and how it's prepared you.
Sure. No, thank you very much, Andrew. And thanks to Ampersand and also Brand Innovators for putting a great agenda together today. So I've been on the agency side now for 3 years. And if you look at the agency vertical, a lot of disruption. Disruption is coming from the amount of data that's available now, all the privacy and compliance parameters that are happening, that there's a lot of data redaction happening. So our ability to plan, activate, and measure is much more compromising. And then when you think about how you have to attribute the various media actions to the millions of dollars our clients entrust in us, there is a much bigger focus on measurement and validation. So if I look at my background, prior to OMB, I was part of Nielsen, I was part of the Innovation Lab, and everyone knows Nielsen, considering the age and gender currency, and that was used to, traffic and really monetize, $70 billion of media spend. There was an opportunity to take age and gender and try to convert that to true audience-centric metrics, and then also be able to combine actions to the media. So now you're getting into full fractional attribution and really be able to quantify your media spend. So Nielsen, I learned a lot there from, currency standpoint, but also, how to go beyond just typical measurement at a market level and take it to an individual level. Before Nielsen, I was the chief marketing officer at a loyalty services company where you're taking loyalty and rewards, so consumer engagement, and you're tying that again down to these media actions. And then before that, where you and I met, Experian, where we led the first addressable TV targeting campaign back in Huntsville. You have an opportunity now to take data and match it to a Comcast subscriber file, and then through the partnerships with the agency, through the partnership with the measurement company, and through the partnership with the technology, you're able to, number one, deliver it and measure it with high level of efficacy. So all those experiences really have culminated now on the agency side. The agency is tasked to make much more sense of data, much more sense of technology, and more importantly, have to defend itself against the CFO and be able to steward those dollars. And one of the things I have for you, Andrew, since we're talking about the new agency world, is I have this little emblem here, this little memorabilia. And what this says, and it's relative to our discussion, it says leadership in changing television advertising. First addressable advertising deployment, but it has 5 logos. It has Comcast, it has Open TV technology, has TNS measurement, has Experian, and then has an agency, which will remain nameless since it's not an Omnicom agency. But the point I'm trying to make is we're all in this together. The supply chain is very long, and there's a lot of interdependencies. So in order to see the pivot in TV, you're going to have to make sense of each of those individual silos and how they all work together on behalf of the advertiser, on behalf of the consumer, to really make things more relevant and then obviously more profitable for everyone.
You know, when we harken back to the year you got that plaque, I'm guessing 2008 kind of a thing, early days of addressable. Right. When you introduced double blind matching, I thought you were talking about introducing a dating service. I didn't actually know we were in the addressable business at the time. So we've come a long way since then, for sure. And as you think about that evolution, you know, and I think back to the agency environment and where you are currently, you know, someone of your skill set, not to sound patronizing, but someone of your skill set and history and background, as you just described, I think would be relatively unique in the agency environment and increasingly important and relevant as you begin this transition, as you think about the intersection of ad tech and martech and data science and advanced analytics. And so speak about a little bit about how on the buy side from the agency, how your business has changed, and a little bit about how you manage sort of the evolution of where we're going with traditional business models. How do you get to where you want to go and yet still pay homage in a way to traditional business models and manage that transition? So speak a little bit to that dynamic as we move in the future. We know it's not a light switch, right? We know it's an evolution. Curious to your observation, as I say, you sit in the engine room of that change. I'm curious to your perspective on it.
Yeah. Because of all the change to ad tech and martech and consumer behaviors and data that's available for these decision making, the workflow of how agencies operate, from planning the media to securing the budget to actually putting in market activation and then being able to make optimization decisions in near real time, and then obviously attribution and measurement, has really made collaboration and boundaryless working conditions really the norm. So you have to have these work streams that have a multidisciplinary approach, that marketing science, which is the individual's task to really validate and really defend the media dollars, defend the attribution, they need to be enabled. They need to be given the right ingredients. And those ingredients come from data partnerships. They come from getting the right data in order to make sense of those decision-making processes. So what you're seeing is a convergence of the marketing science and ad tech, martech roles. You're seeing silos within the agencies breaking down, where you have integrated planning. So not just TV, not just digital, not just a Facebook team, not just a Google team. You're seeing much more collaboration, and that's happening at a very quick pace. And I think, COVID obviously has really stress tested that, and the brands that you saw that have come out ahead, they were able to really be quick and nimble in order to really see that practice come into place.
Yeah, very helpful. As it's an interesting dynamic that's going on, at least from my perspective. Curious to get your point of view on it. As the TV marketplace moves to more deterministic data and deal with that in a privacy compliant way. And it's interesting, you mentioned Conquest a moment ago, which is where I worked at the time when we partnered together. Comcast has a huge business, a distribution business that's wholly independent of the advertising business. And they hold sacrosanct the relationship with that customer. If there's any violation of privacy around that customer relationship, they would easily choose to pull the plug on addressable advertising, as an example, rather than compromise that. The digital players, their revenue is truly tied almost exclusively to the advertising business model. They don't have that same luxury that perhaps and as a result, they perhaps treat data differently. Against that backdrop, it's interesting to see the TV ecosystem move to more deterministic data as we think about planning and buying and measurement and addressable delivery to a household level in an aggregated fashion. And then I'll steal a line from you, which is this notion of what's new is old. I see in the digital marketplace with privacy concern and the issues that we have around GDP, the legislative environment tied to GDPR and CCPA and the related, that I see the digital marketplace almost moving a little bit more back to cohorts. So speak a little bit to the pendulum as it relates to granularity of data, usage of data against the backdrop of an increasingly rigorous legislative environment, and your perspective on where that pendulum swings and the advantages that TV may have or in that evolution.
No, absolutely. Well, to speak specifically about digital and where you're seeing, obviously cookies being deprecated, that then is manifesting itself to, okay, how do you identify audiences? Well, if Google and their privacy sandbox is any indication, which you have now Google referencing third-party cookies going away on the digital side. They've set up a privacy sandbox last year. And a few of their experiments have come out saying, we are going to develop cohorts based on anonymized information coming from the various browser activities. And that will, number one, protect consumer privacy, and that will be available to the ecosystem, agencies and brands. So if you look at that pendulum swinging, you recall in our days at Experian together, where we did have generic segmentation schemas, Prism and Claritas and Mosaic, where we wanted to get to addressable. We wanted to get to 1-1. And that's where we matched, Experian's great, first party individual and household level data to the Comcast subscriber file, where you had 100% match rate because you're using a deterministic data source. Now, on the digital side, you're seeing the pendulum swing in that other direction, where now you have cohorts, maybe the currency, and your ability to go to an individual level on digital, may not be coming to fruition. So where does that leave TV? If you look at TV and all the various forms of it, from OTT, connected device, and streaming, and obviously national linear and 2 minutes an hour versus 16 minutes an hour, you have the ability, because of that deterministic ID infrastructure, to really get to a better level of precision than possibly where we'll be heading to on the digital side, because of the privacy and because of those changes to the ecosystem.
Yeah. I'm curious, in the backdrop of all of this change that we're going through, what are the questions you get from your clients? What are they, as they're trying to navigate this complex world? what are the things that they're most focused on? Are they on, or do they talk about data efficacy, they integrated planning? What are the things that they're coming to you most frequently about their areas of focus as you look at this?
There's a lot of noise in the marketplace where with all these changes, if it's Apple or Google or Facebook. So we are bringing education and awareness on the various changes, and then what impact it has on audience planning, and then more importantly, on our ability to understand reach and frequency, understand true incrementality, and then more importantly, how it is really impacting their KPIs. So the KPIs from, short-term KPIs to even some of the long-term KPIs where we get into unaided brand awareness and brand equity, and trying to triangulate all of the various disparate data sources that we're getting from either silos or we're getting it from different reporting modules. So a lot of the questions that we're getting, is around triangulation and trying to get all the pieces to say the same narrative and same story. And then more importantly, making sure that the actions could tie to the media dollars that we're putting into play.
Yeah. You used the term incremental reach there a moment ago. I'm curious, it feels like addressable has gone from a science experiment to more of a mainstream opportunity in the marketplace as scale and consistency and simplicity take root. We're finding success with brands leveraging the ability to look at their national campaigns, network television campaigns, and understand how that national investment is performing against specific audiences at a household level, and then using addressable as a means to drive incremental reach against underexposed or unexposed audiences as we begin to think about managing reach and managing frequency and deduplicated reach and such. So speak a little bit to that opportunity as you see it in the marketplace. Is it from your client's perspective and within the agency environment, is that the sort of exception, or is it now sort of the norm as you start to think about your holistic planning in terms of capabilities?
If I look at the amount of inquiries that we get on addressable, or the amount of inquiries we get on being able to take a national plan and maybe focus on particular geographies, you're seeing that all of those tools and all of those delivery methods, if it's national linear, or if it's local, or if it's addressable, how do they all work together to be able to really increase the key metrics that we know add to a brand's performance? So there could be certain delivery methods where, national linear is providing, baseline brand awareness. Whereas if you're looking to discriminate between local geographies, or discriminate within a trade mile radius, or where you have access share of voice in terms of share of market, you're seeing all of these capabilities that Ampersand has the delivery methods to do, working in a very symbiotic synergy manner. And I heard one of the other sessions that you had talking about synergy. It's a word that is misunderstood, whereas if I look at TV and video and all the different delivery methods, it's really how do you exploit the synergy between all those delivery methods and have data sit at the core in making those decisions.
You mentioned geography in your comments there a moment ago. We often think about data and addressable and advanced measurement in the context of the national marketplace, the network television marketplace. We also see the evolution in the local TV marketplace in the spot television marketplace, which is part of Ampersand's business, our legacy business in many ways. We also see the evolution to richer audiences, and how do you plan against a luxury auto intender at a DMA level? How do you think about reporting against not just age, gender, or GRPs at a DMA level, but begin to think about audience delivery to help inform and optimize local TV investment. Speak a little bit about the dynamic as you look at the TV marketplace, both network and spot from the buy side, as we think about introducing this data and measurement capabilities, fueling both halves, the entirety of the ecosystem, both network, addressable, and spot. And speak a little bit to the, we're doing some work, I don't want to mention the brand, but we're doing work with a number of your clients about activating audiences at a DMA level, and how that can help inform and optimize your local TV investment. It's a $25 billion business. You mentioned a $70 billion TV marketplace, $45 billion national. Definitely opportunity there. But in the local television marketplace, $25 billion business. Speak a little bit to the agency's sort of position in terms of driving evolution in that space as well.
Yeah. Well, continuing on that theme of being audience-centric and going beyond age and gender, you look at the data partnerships that you've enabled where you're able to take a look at actual viewership data and having those viewership data attributes cut at different levels of precision. It could be at a network level, it could be at a day part cum level, it could be at a geography level. So when you're having the ability to take a look at index reports that are normalized at the different levels of geography that you have at your disposal, you start building an integrated plan that gives you the national reach that you may need for a certain KPI objective, in addition to your local, where you could be prioritizing groups of DMAs, unwired in essence. And then if you need the pinpoint precision to overweight and really make sure that you're over-indexing in terms of penetration on a specific addressable audience, you have all three forms of that working in one actual system. And then being able to measure that in the same manner within one tool. So planning in one tool, measuring in one tool, and having data continuity of that audience, it's very powerful. It's very powerful to be able to give that to a brand, give that to an agency at their disposal.
I think along a similar line, this idea as we think about TV planning and buying and measurement holistically across the national market, the addressable market, and spot marketplace, we also look at sort of collapsing silos around what we think of as TV. You said it before of how you define television. Historically we looked at TV as a live linear product, and now it's content. It's really defined by content, brand safe, professionally produced content, and whether that's distributed and consumed in a live linear fashion or on demand or in some mobile digital device really becomes unimportant. But speak to how that consumer behavior is changing how you organize and plan and think about your go-to-market strategies in the context of historically you'd have a TV group and that TV was largely linear, and then you'd have a digital team, and then you might have network and spot. And so you had mentioned previously sort of this integrated notion. To talk a little bit about that dynamic and how it's changing and evolving from your perspective, because we see from our side on the media vendor side, we increasingly see ourselves sitting in rooms, even if they're virtual at the moment, with the buying community where you have TV folks and digital folks alongside one another thinking holistically, as opposed to in a historically sort of a siloed environment. So speak a little bit about that dynamic and how you see it evolving.
Yeah, I think, back to COVID, and I remember reading up on the transformation that happened because of COVID was in 3 months, the shift we saw both on the consumer behavior side as well as how people responded based on e-commerce and digital was 5 years in the making. So 5 years of potential digital transformation was collapsed into 3. And the key driver of that was agility and being able to shift media dollars and be empathetic in that media dollar shift. So obviously not only changing your allocation, but being able to change the message. So getting out of these longer term deals or upfront traditionally, and being able to be more agile. So what we're seeing is investment be integrated, where video, obviously, which was planned in a silo, be much more aligned to the programmatic or the direct publisher side. And you're seeing tools that are going to try to thread the needle across a specific audience with a persistent ID, so we could assess, the reach and frequency and attribution. So for TV, it's a little bit challenging now with the streaming because of the demand on the streaming platforms. They're still, somewhat out there. If you look at Samsung, they have 50 million households. You look at, Vizio with, 22 million households. We're still having to, look at some of these capabilities in a silo, but look at the overall plan in context to potentially the same data that will describe the audiences across each of those different audiences platforms. So that's how we're seeing it. We're seeing a collapsing and integrated investment is the new norm.
Yeah, encouraging to hear, and I know it's a significant undertaking on your side, to be sure. As we think about data, let's shift a little bit to the sort of client's perspective. How, in light of this world that's evolving to audience-based, how critical is it for brands to own their own identity platform, if you will? And what are the implications of that from a legal privacy standpoint? What are the challenges there? How does that impact your business? How do you guys work with clients in that environment? And does that accelerate the dynamic that we're talking about? Speak a little bit to the, we hear about clean rooms and creating an environment for safe havens. Speak a little bit about that dynamic of sort of identity platforms owned by brands that help inform and optimize media investments.
Yeah, the data redaction that's been happening over the last few years has really been a blessing. It's been a blessing from this standpoint. It's gotten brands, it's gotten agencies, it's gotten clients, all the focus on individual data and how that data is captured, what permissions are granted at the time of that exchange, so consent management. And then it's also then leading into how does that consent management manifest itself in being able to use in a big tech environment where you have walled gardens that are siloed off based on their identity graph. And then obviously from a governance standpoint, you have a lot of focus on antitrust, a lot of focus on Section 230 of the Communication Act. So all of this is happening concurrently. But what it's done for brands and advertisers is it's elevated an entire enterprise data strategy work stream. So getting their data house in order by default will then have to create an identity layer to stitch together the different touch points that consumer is interacting with that brand. If it's owned and operated website, if it's their app, if it's their call center, et cetera, it's forced them to have their own identity graph to stitch it all together. The challenge will be how can that identity graph then be propagated out into the media ecosystem to be able to be used across the different supply side and demand side platforms that are obviously, focused on advertising. But I will tell you, Andrew, I love the discussion that we're having on identity. If you look back in our days together at Experian and Comcast, that was an identity graph. That was a double-blind match. It's just taking on a different form now, and it's being shifted onto the advertiser side so they could own their own first-party data, get the consumer consents themselves, have all the use cases identified, and then being able to release that information out in the ecosystem. So the next 2 years are going to be fascinating because we talked about the clean room and the privacy sandbox of Google. That's good. We're all going to be at the mercy of how that evolves. And then from your standpoint, when we think about video and television, it's already has a deterministic ID, and your ability to have that be leveraged. I think it's exciting for that specific channel and that specific sector.
Yeah, we're obviously excited about it and putting a tremendous amount of resource behind that effort as we try to drive that audience-based evolution, pivoting off of that deterministic data. And that's not only on the planning side, obviously, but it's also on the back-end measurement side. And you spoke a little bit to performance measurement, and traditionally TV has been measured in sort of blunt force manners around age, gender, GRPs, and cost per points or CPMs. But now, as we get into this environment where you can not only tie data, deterministic data to consumer brand information to inform planning, but you can also tie deterministic ad exposure data back to the household to be able to measure brand performance, and whether it's sort of the top of the funnel, as you mentioned, sort of brand tracking metrics, or sort of softer measures, or mid-funnel of brand engagement and offline media, TV driving online digital engagement, or bottom of the funnel sales metrics. Speak a little bit about the balance of and the evolution of sort of brand outcome measurement and the importance of that against the context of traditional media measures and media efficiency measures, and the balance of efficiency and effectiveness measurement and their place in as you sit with the brand teams as they think about making investment decisions. Speak a little bit about that evolution around both efficiency measures and the importance of it, as well as effectiveness, brand outcome measurements, and ROI as that starts to seep into the marketplace.
Yeah. I've seen the evolution that a lot of those measurement tools were looked at in silos. You had a different group looking at brand equity and unaided brand awareness. And then you had a different group, looking at traditional, if it was, marketing mix, if it was traditional list studies, if it was the attempt of fractional contribution and attribution through MTA. Now I'm seeing the convergence of that. And I'm seeing these unaided brand awareness and list studies for brand equity making its way into these measurement systems, that they're either altering the coefficients or they're actually used as an explanatory variable. And it all comes down to full funnel. We hear brands, we hear clients, we hear folks across the spectrum looking at upper funnel separate than lower funnel. It's really full funnel, and it's trying to understand how short-term effects are aligned to long-term effects and long-term with short-term effects. So we're seeing the evolution of that come down pretty quickly. Now, what's interesting, and I think one of your other panelists mentioned this, and it's dear to my heart, because when I think about experimental test design, and I think about innovation labs that are out there, and having been part of two in my career, both at Experian and at Nielsen, the vertical that you sit within, Andrew, because of the deterministic nature of the data sources, if it's the set-top box, if it's the subscriber files, it's the unique inventory avails that are confined, you have the ability to do tremendous amount of experimentation on both sides, on the upper funnel and the lower funnel, and how they can combine. So when you think about saturation and response curves and other type of key metrics, you have the ability to do that at scale based on now all the households that you have under your arsenal in order to test and inform the marketplace. So it's exciting days ahead for that interrelated of brand and lower funnel performance metrics.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic as we I always say that people aren't born with search statefarm.com as part of their medulla oblongata. It's driven by brand building power of TV to drive that behavior, or any level of digital engagement, and to understand the impact of TV and the brand building power of TV to drive outcomes.
Right.
It's a new discipline, I think, in many ways, and I think it's an exciting opportunity. Look, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, in light of the backdrop that we all are operating in now with COVID, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask what impact this environment has had. And you spoke a little bit about it previously with the digital transformation of 5 years and a handful of months. But from an overall perspective, as you work with clients and you hear about their strategies going into the rest of this year and into 22 and beyond, the sort of the backdrop of COVID, is it accelerating that which we're talking about? Is it putting it on pause? Is it, how do you see this environment that we're dealing with today shaping your brand's approach to the marketplace in the relatively near term?
Yeah, I think there has been an increased collaboration benefit because of the technology of video conferencing and being able to schedule with much more efficient. As you and I talked about, Andrew, not getting to go on a plane and then head to the location, then a dinner. You're seeing much more collaboration that then is manifesting itself into a lot more discussions that then are translated into different experiments. I am seeing much more testing happening. I'm seeing a broader extension of the amount of, either tech suppliers or data suppliers or distribution, both buy side and sell side, that this environment we're in, and I've been in this office for a year now. I think experimentation has benefited, and it has caused clients to expect more from the supply chain. That includes the agency of record, that includes the partners. So it actually has increased, I would say, productivity and innovation across the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, I see Davina's popped up, but before we turn it to her, I think back of the journey from the Experian Comcast partnership launching addressable in Huntsville, Alabama, I think is where we were, and to where we are today. And as you reflect and look back on that journey of where we were to where we are, what are some of the things that, from your perspective, sort of key takeaways of, surprised that some things took so long, some things moved quicker, some things moved more aggressively than other. What are some of the observations that you have as you look back, and how that can help shape the future of the business?
Yeah, I think when I look at cookies, I thought the demise and the redaction of cookies was going to be accelerated. I didn't think cookies were going to be a level of currency for so long. When I look at addressability, I look at the 2 minutes an hour that you and I, have fought aggressively to get across the different Comcast markets. I thought the national inventory, the 16 minutes an hour were going to be, made available much sooner, within that. I do think, though, data matching, onboarding, and being able to use an identity graph across the different supply chain partners, I've seen that evolve nicely. And now we're really at a cross section of, what is going to be that persistent ID that's going to go across the different partners. So identity, it goes back to that, is going to be, the area of focus moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And one bit on the inventory comment. Our mission is to help support the entirety of the TV ecosystem, regardless of inventory source. And so whether it's a local break or a national break. And as you're probably aware, Ampersand is owned by Comcast, Cox, and Charter, and they've stood up an effort under the On Addressable banner with programmers to think about how do we bring this technology and jump the tank into the 14, 15 minutes of national inventory. So I do think we've had to get our sort of plumbing in order to make that leap possible. But I think we'll see significant progress on that over the next 18 months. And so we're excited about that next evolution in our business as we power the entirety of the TV ecosystem with data-driven, addressable measurement capability. Well, I can't thank you enough, Costa, for spending time with us this afternoon. I know it's been a journey for both of us to get us to this point, and I think we're both equally optimistic of what the future beholds. And I can't thank you enough for the partnership throughout that journey, and in advance for the collaboration and helping to shape that future for all of us. And appreciate your time here today with the group.
No, thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Davina, as well.
Thank you both. This was a great day. So we heard from Costa and Andrew kind of wrapping up the day around how a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of how the tools that are available to advertisers to respond to this kind of changing landscape. We heard from Burger King, Mass Mutual, BlackRock, all brands that are in different stages on how they're defining their audience strategies and how they think about measurement. And General Motors, of course, and really they seem to be the most furthest along with their audience strategy and really the customer journey, a lot about the customer journey. So thank you to everyone and all our speakers. We hope that you'll tune in tomorrow to Brand Innovators, as well as Friday, where there's a 2-day tent pole around the Super Bowl. With a lot of sneak peek into the strategy with all the fun commercials in the Super Bowl. We're going to have speakers, sports marketing leaders from Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, Visa, Anheuser-Busch, Verizon, and a special panel with the NFL, including the CMO, Tim Ellis. So thanks, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again soon.